I'm extremely excited to bring you our first ever annual Beyond Trauma Summit 2024 in recognition of World Mental Health Day. And what a fitting time to launch our annual summit from World Mental Health Day. So, my name is Mayameen Meftahi, and I'm the founder of Beyond Trauma Academy. So those of you who may know me may already know my story and the waiving of my anonymity as a child sexual abuse survivor. And when I did that, unknowingly to me, did it hit national and international media, and the journey leading to being the recipient of British Empire Medal for the Queen's Honours. But let's rewind all of that, because before all of that media malarkey went out there, I'd been in the field of sexual violence for nearly a decade. So it was just that my story, in particular, my public story, had never been shared. So that was obviously part of my journey. In 2016, actually, when I was going through my own healing, I started writing my own trauma recovery program. And again, this was used for my own trauma recovery. And terrifyingly, I decided to release it to others when I moved to the beautiful place of Swansea. And I thought, you know what? Let's just do this. It's what I've used for my own healing. It's bits and pieces I've brought together through my personal, my professional skills. Let's just offer it out there. And wow, I certainly wasn't expecting anybody to turn up for the first group session, but they did. We had a full house, and I remember all of those who joined that day. And I certainly wasn't expecting for it to grow into a much needed intervention. And the highlights, the successes speaks for itself. But then one day, someone said to me, I want to deliver your program. No. That's my baby. I wrote that, I do it, I deliver it, that's my baby. Oh, no, no, no. I'm way too overprotective. That's not happening. And then about a year later, I was reflecting and I thought to myself, do you know what? I'm just one woman. I'm just one woman trying to reach other women to tell you we are not crazy. We are not crazy. Okay. But then one day, that's going to then end with me. And I don't want that. I want this to continue without me. I want people to be able to access trauma recovery from a lived experience, not top down, straight down perspective. And I finally let the baby fly the nest, though I say that, and I'm sure that Nazi and Ruby, who are our speakers and facilitators of this program, would probably be thinking, not quite so easy as she makes it sound, because they have had to ride the journey with me. In particular, Nazi, Ruby, and Saida, who were my first facilitators to join the journey. So they've had to put up with a lot, to be honest, from me, because it wasn't quite so easy to let that baby grow. But that brings us tonight, an opportunity for me, especially for me, to show off my amazing, incredible, inspirational Beyond Trauma facilitators, the women who have trusted me, in actual fact, joined the journey and are building their own legacies for healing. And I think it's about time that they were the ones with the visibility and the forefront, because they too have their own scars and they're using their scars to build their own healing legacies. And what an honor for them to have chosen my program to assist with that. Okay, so please also be aware that throughout this evening, you are potentially going to have your triggers. Okay, we all going through different journeys, we're all at different chapters of our stories, and triggers are those unexpected or random things that happen. So it's important that first of all you look after yourself. Okay, like I said, we're going to have the recording. So if this is getting a little bit too intense, you are not under any obligation to have to stay. But what I am offering you is wraparound support. So in our Facebook group, where you would have had to have come through to come into this, there is a chat that you are more than welcome to come into that's been set up specifically for aftercare of our summit. And you can utilize the support that we're offering. And again, I'll be sharing this later on. And you are more than welcome to message me or the moderator, Jill, who is here this evening as a co-host. If you have any questions or you'd like to, be a little bit more anonymous. But let's get this party started, or should I say our summit started, because there are some wonderful, wonderful warriors sitting here tonight that have joined us that are waiting to share with you and to hopefully resonate with you. Yeah, I know party's probably not quite the word we would use when we're talking about trauma, but why not? Let's lighten it. We live it. We're not crazy, remember? I've already told us this, so we can all embrace this together. But hopefully there will be some resonations tonight, and hopefully, more importantly, to bring you solace, because it can be a very lonely journey. And we want to bring you some hope, and we want to bring you strength so that you can rise and deserve to rise beyond trauma. And I hope that maybe some of you here will be that inspired that you will join our team and be up here with us next year, or will hopefully be a much bigger, better BeyondTrauma Summit 2025. So, without further ado, I would like to welcome the absolutely awe-inspiring first speaker of this evening, Yasmin Khan. Yasmin is a woman of many, many strengths, and she's bringing her light into many women's darkest moments.
First of all, thank you so much, Maya, for that introduction. I just wanted to say a little bit about Maya before we begin, because she's always going on about all of us. She doesn't talk about how amazing she is. So Maya is our mentor. She's not just a mentor, but she's also our guide, our biggest motivator, and she's a sister as well. She's behind the scenes of taking all the stress of the tech and everything away. All we had to do is get ready and show up. So thank you so much. And then we've got Jill as well, who is behind the scenes doing everything possible to make sure that this live actually happens and there's no technical faults. So thank you so much once again, Maya. So good evening and assalamu alaikum to everybody who's joined us today at the live, and maybe you might be seeing the recording later. First of all, I'd like to thank you for being here today, because you know what, it's the evening, it's a school day, you've got kids, you've got life. So if you're sitting here, so well done to you to make that effort. So I know that you are here to, really take something away. And I hope that this, the next 20 minutes that I speak is, at least even if you take one thing away, I will be happy and I feel like that my job has been done. So thank you so much for joining this important conversation. And as I'm the first speaker, I was really nervous being the first one. I'm like, oh God, do you know what? The pressure's on. I've got to set the tone. But what I wanted to share is what is my hope for the evening. So I hope that this evening is all about inspiring you to become the best versions of yourself. I hope that it's transformative. And I really hope that you find this space to be safe for your growth, for your healing, and for your learning. And so let's talk a bit about what I'm going to be sharing. So when we were told that we were going to do this summit and we're going to be talking about mental health, particularly about trauma and PTSD, I was like, going through the idea of what do I talk about? So at first I thought, you know what, I'd share my journey, the troublesome journey of me becoming a Muslim. And I was a revert, and the trauma and the effects of it. Then I thought, do you know what? I can actually talk about my experience as a parent who has a child with special needs. And if you have a child with special needs, you know the difficulties, the day in, day out, things that you're dealing with. And I thought I'd share with you guys that story. But then I thought, how about I shared about my difficult and turbulent marriage, which recently ended in divorce? And I thought these are just stories to get me to the end or to the place I'm at. So I wanted to go a little bit back and really reflect and be real and authentic with you and not just talk about my life experiences, but really, where did it stem from? And I know it's going to be triggering for some of you. And I hope that, like Maya said, if it does get triggering, you're not obliged to stay. You can take a break, walk away, have a drink, come back, and then hopefully it's not going to be triggering, hopefully, but if it is, you know what to do. So what I've decided is to talk about where it all started for me, where I believe that it started for me. How did I become the person that I was before my healing journey? And how did I become the person I was after I I started my healing journey? And I started to understand why did certain things trigger me? Me and two people could be in the same room experiencing the same thing, but why would certain things trigger me and not the other person? And why would certain things create anxiety in me where the other person didn't feel it? So understanding all of that was so key. And what it took me down to my childhood trauma that I experienced. And I think that itself was shaped my beliefs about myself and why it led me to this journey of healing and then helping other women to heal as well. So my journey doesn't actually start with Maya and this trauma facilitation course. It actually started way back in my 20s when I wanted to be a counselor. And let me tell you a little story. I was the youngest one over there because everybody was in their 30s or their 40s or their 50s, because that's when you actually realize that, hold on, something's wrong. I don't feel right in my relationships, or I'm not happy, or I don't feel good enough. I'm always angry. I'm always, in the state of rush, rush, rush. Whereas me, I'm the 20 something, 21-year-old sitting in there, and I'm like, and they all look at me like, why the hell are you here? You're 21. What have you experienced? But, even at that time, when you go through childhood trauma, sometimes what happens is that we can suppress those memories. But deep within my unconscious mind, I knew that this was the path that I wanted to take, the path of healing. And that's where my journey started. And then obviously it goes on to me being into adulthood. Let me tell you a little bit about what it was like for me going through childhood trauma and how I overcame it. So for me, what it was like, it felt like I grew up feeling that I didn't deserve to be loved and I didn't deserve to be cared for. So when you as a child feel that, what you do is you start behaving in that way. Not only children, actually, this is, I've noticed this in adults as well, that as a child or an adult, that when you are feeling internally that actually I don't deserve to be loved, I don't deserve to be taken care of, we unconsciously or subconsciously start behaving in a way. So we feel like, okay, we don't deserve to be loved, we don't deserve to be cared for. And that's something that I carried in my childhood into my teenage years until I had my children. And I will tell you a little bit about that later on. And then the other thing that I did when I was going through my childhood traumas and just experiencing this, by the way, it wasn't that I was consciously feeling that, oh, you know what, Yasmin, you don't deserve love, you don't deserve care. I didn't know that. I was just behaving in that way. And then also what I did was I always felt that I would take everything personally. It was like as if the world was targeting me, like I'm the bad one. And I became a victim, like, oh my God, why me? It's always me, it's always me. And I have that thing growing up, especially in the teenage years. And when you struggle with feeling that you don't deserve love and you don't deserve care, you start having a very low self-worth about yourself. You have very low self-confidence. And it hit the peak in my teenage years, because with teenage years, you're already hormonal, you're already lashing out, you're already feeling inadequate. And then when you have that extra childhood trauma on you, it just makes it like 10 times worse. And that's how it was. And I feel like as I grew older, my inner child wounds were getting opened. And it was very, very painful. And I became very sensitive to emotional pain. So my reactions were there were two opposite. Either I would lash out and anger, or I would completely avoid it and become numb. Like, I can't deal with this, do you know? So there was no middle ground, and that's very unhealthy. And I didn't realize that this is, sorry, I didn't realize that this was an unhealthy behavior, which I always later on picked up when I did do my trauma informed course and my other courses that I did. So, so these are the things that I experienced. And let me talk to you a bit more about the anger, because anger was my main kind of outburst. That's how I expressed it. And I thought that I just thought I was an angry person. You know, that's what, she's always angry, she's always upset. I had this thing that she's the angry person. So I was like, okay, fine, I'm an angry person. So that's what's expected of me. So I'm just going to be angry all the time because that's normal. So I would do that. And then see, there's two types of anger. There's one which is the exploding anger, and then there's the passive aggressive one, like giving sarcastic remarks and doing things. And I'm sure that most of you must have experienced that, like the passive aggressiveness anger and the exploding anger, or you may have done it yourself. So what this course does and what your healing does, it's the anger is actually a mechanism to protect you. It becomes dangerous or becomes unhealthy when that is the only form of way communicating, and you don't know when you're crossing the lines. So what this course does, what it helped me with, was to become assertive. So my anger is still there, but someone's making me angry, I know it's crossing a boundary. I know how to be assertive now, and it's much more healthier to deal with. So, so how did I cope with it when I was in that state of anger? How did I bring myself down? First of all, I didn't know what coping was. I just thought that's what it was. But I did realize over time, and especially understanding how trauma impacts your brain and what it does, is there are things to cope. Trauma doesn't go away, but there are ways to cope with how trauma affects you. So, by the way, trauma, it doesn't necessarily mean that you will act out in anger. There are so many different symptoms. So everybody would go through something different. Someone could really become hyperarousal. Someone could become very numb. Someone could just, they could just shut down. So there's different ways. For me, it was anger, it was the outburst, both ways, even avoiding or actually exploding. So what I started doing, and this is something that might be beneficial to you guys as well, if that's how if you resonate with that, you're like, you know what, yeah, I feel angry sometimes and I do lash out. So the coping mechanism that I want to share with you, which helped me, is just slowing down your thoughts. Because when you're angry, your mouth is talking faster than your brain can actually process it. So when I slowed down, I'm like, okay, my brain is exploding. It's telling me a million things. My words want to come out like 1,000 words in a minute. In a minute, I just want to slow down, and I'm just like processing my thoughts. Like, okay, what is it about this situation that's making me angry? All right, is it worth your energy? Are you going to regret this? So it's just basically questioning myself. Like, okay, you're feeling angry right now. Just kind of slow your brain down, because your brain is on hyper mode. You can't cope with it. You just can't. As a child, that goes out the window. Do you understand? As an adult, you can stop and you can think. And also, the second thing that I also now do is allowing my body to tell me that feeling. Now, if I'm feeling angry, where is it? Is it in my stomach? Is it on my shoulders? Is it in my heart? Is it in my neck? Where is that feeling of anxiety? And then just talking to my heart, like, slow down, it's okay. Slow down, it's all right. My stomach's feeling a bit tight. Okay, it's all right. You're fine, you're safe. And just self-talking and self-regulating really does help. I know it might sound like cuckoo to you, like, what the hell, but when you try it and it works, and you're like, wow, this is like a lifesaver for you. Right. So I want to go on to a little bit more and ask you guys, well, actually, you might be asking me now, what is trauma? That's actually the $1,000,000 question. What is trauma? So I'm going to explain to you in a story mode, in like an analogy. So trauma is, I want you to visualize it. I'm a visual learner. I like to visualize things. So if you're not a visualizer, but still, you gotta visualize with me. So trauma is like a wound, okay? Imagine you've got a wound on your arm, and you've cut it, and you've put a plaster on it, okay? You've put the plaster on it, but it actually needs stitches, but you just put plaster on it and it wasn't treated properly. So on the surface, it seems like everything is fine, everything is fine. It looks completely fine to you, but underneath, there's a wound that's festering and it's growing and it starts to affect the other parts of your arm, like your bone, like the nerves, like the skin. And it's just festering and festering and festering. And it begins to hurt even to touch it. And then what it does is overall, it weakens your overall well-being. I mean, if anybody's had a toothache or an earache, right? You had a yes, I have to tell you a story about my tooth, but that's another story. Anyway, I think I'm following you and Samina, but that's another story for another day. But when you have a toothache or you have an earache, I don't know about you guys, but I cannot function. I cannot function because my focus is just on that pain. I'm like, oh God, get that pain away. So that's what trauma is like. It's like a wound that hasn't been treated properly. So don't ever think that, you know what, I've had such a shit childhood, or sorry about my language, I've had a really crap childhood, or I've, experienced such horrendous things that I am like broken, or I'm not fixable. That is not true. That is not true. There's nothing like unfixable. You can fix yourself. I mean, you're not broken to be fixed. You're a human being. You experience painful things and you can overcome it. So how does healing actually happen? So healing happens when we remove that old bandage, remove it, we clean the wound properly. Sometimes, you know what, rubbing alcohol will sting. And that's the problem. We don't like the sting. We would rather let it turn into a massive infection, but that sting is like, oh, I'd rather avoid it. And that's what we do. We avoid trauma. And that's where the wound just gets bigger and it festers. So what we need to do, how does healing happen? You remove that bandage, you clean the wound properly, and you give it the care it needs from inside out. And that's what we need to do with our wound. From inside out, you need to work on that. So let's go step by step what we need to know. First of all, when you are healing, the first thing to acknowledge is be aware that there's something wrong. If there is no awareness, you can't be helped. You may have seen, like, in your family, your friends or colleagues, that this person clearly has some kind of issue. But they cannot be helped, even if you get the top psychiatrist or top coach or the top trauma expert to help them if they see there's no problem. So awareness, become aware that there's an issue, follow it by positive action. And then sometimes what we do is we start coping in good or bad. So sometimes you might cope in a way that's, shutting out everybody and being like, I don't want to talk to nobody. Or, maybe an addiction. Addiction could be shopping or spending money or drinking or smoking or whatever. And what happens is you have to understand the root of the issue. What is the root? So for me, my root was not, my mom having a go at me when I was a teenager and all of these things. The root was my experience as a child. The childhood trauma caused so much damage to me that I didn't know. And when I realized that, hold on, when I put two and two together, it was so empowering for me to understand that, whoa, that's what happened to me. I'm not crazy. I'm not an angry person. I'm not this messed up being, actually. Because did you know that childhood trauma can actually significantly impact the development of the brain for children? Because children, the brain are still developing at 7, 8, 9, 6, whatever. When you're an adult, your brain stops, it's fully grown. So let me explain it to you in a better way. So if a 6-year-old and a 30-year-old experience the same trauma, right? A 6-year-old won't be able to process it the way a 30-year-old will because of the brain development. So what happens is that the front part of our brain is where it's responsible for emotional regulation, memory, and stress response. When that is not even developed, can you understand the impact that it would have on a child who doesn't even know that something has happened with them and they don't know it's wrong, right? So anyway, I'm looking at the time. I do have 5 more minutes, so that's great. So what I wanted to do is, I don't want to bore you guys with any more stories, but what I wanted to do is end this my talk by saying that yes, you may have experienced trauma. Yes, it was painful. Yes, it wasn't your fault, but you're an adult now. You take responsibility. Your trauma is not an excuse for anything negative. In fact, you use that to empower yourself and be the voice for all people. And I feel like today I'm standing here in front of you all with someone who has lived through trauma and has come out the other end, not as a survivor. I don't feel like I'm a survivor, but someone who is committed to helping others as well and to thrive and know that trauma does not define you. It's not who you are, it's an experience and it wasn't your fault. And with that, what I wanted to say is just want to say if anybody has any questions, please do put them in the comments. We're not going to answer them right now, but towards the end, we will answer the questions because I know there'll be wonderful speakers. You're going to forget everything I say. So make sure you put those questions in if you have any questions for me. And we have some wonderful, amazing offers and prizes and things to be won. So stay back. And I hope that you enjoyed it. If you did resonate with it, I hope you did. And thank you for listening.
Thank you, Yasmin. Mashallah, well done. Honestly, amazing. And you know what? I'm probably going to speak for the many, many other ladies and women, and the chat's blowing up for you. You are superb, absolutely brilliant. And you know what? So much resonation there, Yasmin, especially with anger. You know, we are women. And, you know, we are meant to be the calm, you know, we are supposed to be the ones that don't show that. So, not only is anger such a negative emotion and a very common, as we know, trauma response, but it's also one that's very, very shameful and we shouldn't be feeling it. So do you know what? I'm so glad you've touched upon that so early on in our summit this evening because it's really, really important. And I loved the analogy with the bandage and the sting. We hate sting, right? But that sting is so much quicker than it can be if you're taking it off very slowly. What can I say? Yasmin, as you can tell, is the woman who knows and absolutely fantastic. Well done. Thank you so much, Yasmin. And ladies, you will get an opportunity later on during our Q&A session to put your questions to Yasmin. And you will be seeing more of Yasmin, as you will all of our facilitators from here on. Once a month, we will be bringing you topics and awareness with each individual facilitator on a more personal level. So you will certainly be seeing a lot more of our beautiful Yasmin. Thank you so much, Yasmin. Okay, so now we would like to move on to our next facilitator speaker, as I mentioned before, one who has been on this journey with me from the beginning. And I'd like to bring to you Ruby. So Ruby has been on this journey actually with me since 2021. And Ruby is a pure woman of courage. She's the epitome of resilience. And she is helping you heal. Not only is she using her skills, but she's also helping you heal with her own lived experience. So without further ado, let's welcome the wonderful, spectacular, courageous Ruby.
Good evening. Where do I begin? Like Yasmin, there aren't enough words to thank Maya because she's put herself on the line. She's not just opened up a door, she's opened up a world for us if we could only touch it and feel it. If I continue commenting on Maya, I'm not going to begin my speech. So I'm going to say, I cannot explain how great the program is, which is why I'm here and which is why I intend to continue. But I am going to be sharing my journey, and my journey is actually could be quite triggering. Maya's mentioned it. Please take care of yourself. I don't intend to share anything that's too triggering, but we don't know how triggers happen. So please, please be mindful of yourself because anything can happen at any time. And we're the first ones to be able to understand and appreciate. Okay. So I'm going to share my journey of how I came to the Beyond Trauma program and what it did for me. And my journey is something that I hope you haven't experienced, but there is a possibility you may know somebody that has. And it's a journey of an attack. because I used to go for a walk every morning. I used to do my Fajr. So as a Muslim, I pray Fajr. I would do my other readings and I would leave quite early in the morning. Every single day I went for a walk for about an hour to an hour and a half because I'm just so super cool that I needed to do that. And I'd listen to my lectures as I went along, and it was spectacular. My daughters lived in central London, so I was quite close to the River Thames and I could cross over any bridge at any time. So it was actually a really lovely, soothing way to begin my day. On the 15th of November, 2020, a man made a choice to attack me. I wasn't to know that that attack, that choice, was going to change my world. Not only was it going to change my world, things were going to happen in my mind, in my heart, in my body that I was not going to understand. And had I not found this program, I would be lost even now. So I'm going to take you back to before I left my home, because the detail is really important. When something happens that you might need to report or talk about to a professional, a doctor, a police officer, anybody that's going to take notes, you really need the detail. So I left my home armed with my jacket, my walking shoes, and I had an umbrella. And as you can tell, I covered my hair, so I had my turban on, but I chose to take an umbrella, and it wasn't one that folds over. It was a long one, so you can walk with it as a walking stick. When this man decided to attack me, he came from behind and squeezed me so tightly, I thought I was going to die. I thought he was going to hurt me and harm me, and I was worried about my children who were at home. I thought, they're not going to see me again, and I'm not going to see them again. And the other thought that was in my head, which is really conflicting, was I work in criminal justice, so I work with people who've been abused. So I'd worked with a lot of people that had been attacked, unfortunately raped, and so I knew their stories. So I had another narrative in my mind. So I had all of this happening at the point of impact. And the reason I share that is because our thoughts and what's happening in our body is really important for us. We have to identify what's happening to us and not let a professional who's worked with hundreds, maybe thousands of cases, override our thinking and our narrative. Because when we shift from what we believe, we lose who we are, and we're healing something that doesn't need to be healed. Anyway, what happened after that, he threw me to the ground, and I didn't fall over. I rolled over as God was protecting me. In that instance, I heard the tail end of a scream. So I must have screamed when he attacked me. Again, I have no conscious memory. As I screamed and got up, I realized there was nobody there. It was COVID. I decided I was going to fight back. He wasn't going to do this to another woman while I was alive. Very simple thought pattern. I didn't care what the result was. I was going to fight. So I got up and I went toward him. I'm going to stop the story there for now. I will hope to pick up on it at the end. After this had happened, I went to the police in the House of Parliament. I told the police what had happened. I was really worried he would hurt somebody else. And then I went on my wonderful journey home. And that's where my journey really begins, in noticing what was happening in my body. Things started happening in my heart. There was this kind of pulsating heartbeat, but not. My chest started feeling things that I couldn't identify. And then I started crossing the bridge. I had to cross Westminster Bridge to go home. Every young man I saw, anybody in their 20s and 30s, became a fear factor. Something in my head was saying, you have to be afraid of them. And again, the conflicting thought was, no, I don't. I'm not scared of him. He can't do anything. But I didn't know what was happening now in my body. I crossed the bridge, and because I work in criminal justice and I've worked with so many abusers and so many victims, I had all these stories charging at me, and I started thinking about the children that I'd read reports on. And there was one that came to mind in a really powerful way. It was a 15-year-old boy who'd been abused by somebody. He'd written his story and he said, I have to share this story, not necessarily because I want to, but I want to prevent other people from being harmed. In that journey, he also shared with us that he was still waking up crying. He was still waking up sweating at nighttime, pulsating heartbeat. He literally shared scenes that you see in a movie where somebody's lying down, bolts up into the bed and is sweating because of what was done to him. And I started thinking how brave they were, which I'd always believed. But at this point, it kind of became a bit of a spike. Again, all these conflicting feelings were going on inside my body. I managed to get home, and this is actually quite dangerous what I'm about to share. I just started telling my daughters everything. I've just been on a walk. This is what's happened. He did this to me. And I just continually I was offloading. In the offload, my daughter said, Ami, are you okay? And I'm sitting there going, yeah, this man did this, you know, all the words are not coming out and I'm speaking so fast. She said, Ami, are you okay? Sit down. I sat down and she said, you just told me that you've been attacked, that a man has attacked you. And I said, yeah, that's what just happened. Why am I sharing this part? Because we get so affected. We don't differentiate with what is a normal conversation with something that's so triggering and so painful. When I look back on it, I sit there and I go, oh my God, I came home and I scared my daughters to death. And then as we calmed down and we went through the story again, we just sat down and they said, Ami, do you know you're bleeding? And I said, what are you talking about? My knee was bleeding. My trousers had a big hole in them because when he pushed me down, I'd fallen and grazed my leg. Blood had started. I had no memory of this. And then on top of that, I had an umbrella. This is why I told you about the detail. At the beginning, I'd taken this long umbrella with me. I'd been on this journey. I'd had a very difficult time. I didn't know that I had an umbrella. And it's really critical when you then share this with a professional that they have your detail. Anyway, after this, because I'm the brave soul that I am, and because I knew from childhood that if you fall, you need to get up and start again, I was going to go for my walk the next day, which I did. No problem, same routine, put my turban on, put my jacket on, I've got my walking shoes, and I'm off on my walk. And I took my daughter with me because she was off. This is where it became really, really painful and difficult and beyond my understanding. I walked less than 100 yards and you would have thought I'd run a marathon. I couldn't breathe. I was huffing and puffing. I did what a runner does after a marathon. You know, when you fold forward and you just drop your head to regain your breathing, take it back down. And the problem is, it didn't really go down, but I was still going to go through this. We spent a good few minutes just in that spot. And then I went again, same thing happened, had to stop. And the third time my daughter said, Mum, you're not well enough. We need to go home. And of course I'm well. There's nothing wrong with me. Did the next journey. So I was probably out about 20 minutes that day and decided there was definitely something wrong. Went home, didn't really think twice about it. Same thing the next day, same thing the next day. Fortunately, I had told family and friends and had a pretty good reception, except one person said, Ruby, do you want to go on a trauma program? And I immediately, no thought about it, yes. I'd been doing this walk now for 2 or 3 weeks since the attack, and that's when I met Mayameen. That's when I found the program. That's where the real healing began. I started learning things I didn't know existed. Apparently, our body has this safety mechanism. And of course, we all know about it because when we're raising our children, what's the first thing we do? When they go near something warm, we tell them not to touch it. What do our children do? They touch it. What happens? They scream and they learn, I shouldn't have touched that. But their safety mechanism is cyclical. You do something wrong, you get a jolt, it goes back into place. That's not what happens with trauma. It goes crazy. And this is part of the reason that this program is so critical for somebody that's experienced trauma, any trauma, resetting our safety mechanisms. So I'm not going to go into the technicality, but the amygdala, resetting that is crucial in our healing. But if you don't know that it's out of sync, how are you going to set it? How are you going to reset it? How are you going to recognize that right now my system's gone crazy and it's not me? That's another really powerful point that I learned in the program. When you start thinking you're going crazy because you can't explain what you're doing, it's not you going crazy. People don't understand what trauma does to your body, to your mind, your physicality. And then when you try to explain it, it does sound crazy because what's happening to you is not heard and understood by them. I found that throughout my journey. So I've now got the amygdala in place. Okay, I've got to do something here. What I didn't understand was, why was I still huffing and puffing? Because I'd now been going on my walks daily, been at least 3 or 4 weeks. I was still stopping, a little bit less. And then I had to go back to work. So within about 4 weeks of my attack, I returned to work. And that's when things escalated on another level that I could not have imagined. I was experiencing pain I couldn't explain. It was leaving me exhausted. I would go home after work and be completely wiped out. When it happened 3 days in a row, I ended up in A&E, accident and emergency. Wonderful doctors, wonderful nurses, great professional staff. I had my urine tested, I had my blood tested, and all the other things that they do. Everything came up perfect. What does that teach us? There's nothing wrong with my blood. There's nothing wrong with my urine. It teaches us that medicine doesn't know how to deal with trauma. The doctors and nurses are fabulous. They were really kind, really nice, really concerned. They gave me everything they had at their disposal, but they don't know how to manage trauma in one sitting. And most people are not trained to manage trauma. So I left, I went home, and thank goodness we were probably on about week 4 or 5 of the trauma program. So I was still building on my knowledge. At that point, I wasn't able to connect things. What I'd started doing at work, which is really dangerous for me, I was missing tiny, tiny bits of information. And it really is silly when I talk about it now, but it's critical that you know. If I filled in a form, I'd maybe miss a number, maybe not write a line of an address. But to me, because of trauma, for me, it was the end of the world. Oh my God, I can't complete forms. What am I going to do? I'm going to miss a risk. That person's going to have their life affected. So my head now was in a space that it should never have been in. So all of these started happening. And fortunately, I was gaining skills to learn how to manage all of this stuff. Returned back home and started seeing the difference as I started applying everything. When I started applying what Mayameen had said about the clusters, I realized that on the trip back from the attack, all these things fell within the hyperarousal cluster. I didn't know about that. I kind of knew I was being a bit hyper, but there's the cluster, there's a behavior that's associated with it. And it's not just 1 or 2. There's so many, I can't even begin to list them. But once I was armed with that, I could start taking it apart and saying, okay, I've seen this guy, because it happened for a good, this triggering of seeing young men happened for more than about 3 months. I would see a random man and I would stop. As irrational as it was and as irrational as I knew it was, I needed that time. And by giving myself that time, I got to a stage of realizing that's a trigger, throw it away. It's a trigger, throw it away. But I was on top of it. It took me 6 weeks to walk 20 to 25 minutes without stopping. It took another 6 to 8 weeks before I could walk for 3 whole months. It took another 6 weeks for me to walk 60 to 90 minutes, which was my normal walking time. So what I learned in this process was the safety mechanism had been altered and I had to reset that. What adrenaline was doing to my body was way beyond my control, and I just had to work that through because it got kicked off at certain times. And what the magic potion was for me, and I need you to hear this because you're going to come to different solutions for whatever you're going through. Every single time I left my home to walk with the intention of walking, I got triggered. My safety mechanism shut down and I went into adrenaline crazy mode. walked all day long and nothing happened, because in the course of the day, you've got to go here and you've got to go there. You're in the office, you're in the bathroom, nothing ever happened. I used to work very far from home. I went from London to Bristol, 2.5 hour journey, nothing happened. Every single time I went for a walk, my amygdala went crazy and my adrenaline said, really? Show me how you're going to cope. But by having all of this program, the skills, the tiny things we learn, the coping mechanisms, I was able to kick that. What I do want to share, and the reason I stopped my story of the attack a bit earlier, was I want to know, if I can, I don't know whether there's any mechanism of somebody putting their hands up or me getting an idea. What do you think happened when I rolled over on the floor, got up and decided to fight back? Do you think I did fight back? Do you think I didn't fight back? If I fought back, what do you think I did? Can anybody give me an idea or share something?
So I would probably think that you froze. Saeed just said you froze. Simon said, I think you went for him. Amina's saying you used the umbrella. Yasmin saying, I think you fought back. So yeah, we've got some real mixed responses coming. I think you went for him.
I
Was one of
did.
them.
I
Yeah, so yeah,
went for
very
him.
mixed response we've got between the froze, you didn't fight back,
Yeah,
or you froze.
yeah.
You've used your umbrella. Yeah.
I went for him. I got up, I went for him, and this is the point you can all start laughing because everybody always does. I went for him. He said sorry. He said sorry 3, 4 times. I looked up at the sky, and because I believe in a God, I thank the Lord. And then the next stage is probably the part you want to laugh at. What do you think I did next? And I have to put my eyes down here.
Come on,
Okay, I'm
Ruby.
just going to tell you. I chased him. I started chasing him and I started catching up. And the reason I've left it to the end, that's what adrenaline does. I was single focused. I had one objective, and that was to get this man who had thought that he should be able to touch somebody against their will. I gave him no permission. I didn't lead him on. I didn't see him, and he attacked me. So I chased him, started catching up, and as God is so great, he decided he was looking over his shoulder and realizing this woman's catching up. And when I was probably less than 2 meters from him, he stopped and shot back the other way, which was my saving grace, because I wasn't going to chase him the other way. There was nobody there. It was COVID. The direction he was running in, there were probably going to be people. And that adrenaline from that day took months to get worked out of my body. And I had to work at it diligently. The outcomes for me were fantastic because of the program, because I had Mayameen, who knows so much more about so many different traumas. What I know, and I'm a criminal justice professional, is that I didn't ask for that. This man, in making that choice, affected my life in a way that I cannot imagine and destroyed the actual world that I live in. I had to reset that, and I'm really passionate about helping people to stay in their truth and work with that, which is why I'm supporting this program the way that I do, because you can and you will make it through, because we have all of that within us. Everything is there. Mayameen's program helps to tease it out. And the strongest thing about the program is you do it in your time, the way you want. Nobody overrides your story and tells you what to do. It's about you. So on that note, I'd like to thank you all for listening to me, and whatever I can do, please let me know. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ruby. And chat's going wild again, which is fantastic. And honestly, there's compliments in there. Have a look when you can, Ruby, because I know that's so hard for you to share. And thank you deeply from me, from everybody, for sharing that. Because you know what, when we talk about trauma, and you rightly said it, Ruby, we're talking about all forms of trauma. Trauma comes in so many different ways, and what we've kind of been brainwashed to, or maybe, you know, that the stereotype sort of, you know, of trauma is rape, domestic violence, and nobody is devaluing any forms of trauma, but we forget that actually trauma is in loss, in bereavement, in grief. It's in things that happen in everyday life, like walking the street and something like that, you know. And let's be honest, it's one of our biggest fears, you know. Women in again, we're going back to women in general, but you know, it is, you know, walking streets, walking the darkness. And you know, you've literally shown how brave and courageous. And thank you for putting a little bit of light and humor to it. Thank you, Ruby. That just sums you up. And you know what? It's an absolute pleasure to have you on our team. And thank you so much. And yes, ladies, you'll be hearing more from Ruby during our Q&A session. And again, as a reminder, moving forward for our monthly awareness series that are going to be taking place once a month, where our fantastic facilitators will be showcasing. So thank you once again, Ruby. Wow. Okay. So time is literally flying, and we have one more and not one less beautiful speaker before we will take a very short break to catch up on our time. But what a lineup! What a lineup, coming from so many different avenues. Brings us to Samina. So Samina is once again the epitome of a warrior. A woman who has been through so much. But what Samina will say from her own words is that trauma can break us. It absolutely can. And recovery can stitch us back together. And I like to say that Samina is strong, but I think when you hear from her, she may say so otherwise. So without further ado, we welcome Samina.
Hi, Maya, and thanks a lot for the lovely, lovely introduction. I just hope I can do you some justice with what I'm about to share. So, yeah, so let's just go. I'm going to start it off with a quote, actually, and then we'll take it from there. So, why do people keep on telling us to be strong when the most devastating, earth-shattering things happen to them? They don't need to be strong. They need to fall apart and be assured that we'll be there to care and protect them while they do, and help them build back up when they are ready. So what I'm about to share with you is coming from a conversation that I had with a friend a couple of weeks ago. We were just talking about life in general, and we were talking about ups and downs in life when my friend said something to me that kind of like left me a little bit gobsmacked for a moment. I mean, I'd heard it before. I mean, what she said to me was, Sam, whenever I'm going through a rough time, I always think of you as someone who is really strong and really resilient. And whenever I'm going through a tough time, I always look up at you and I always remember you. And I was quiet because in the past, I used to wear that as a badge of honor. You know, I used to feel kind of like, oh, wow, I'm strong. And yeah, I am strong, you know, with what I've been through. But I didn't really feel it. I didn't feel strong within me. And so I said to her, I said, you know, it's not something that I really had a choice with, really. I had no choice but to be strong. It's something that I just had to be, you know, I had to be strong for my siblings. I had to be strong for my father. I had to be strong for the memory of my mother, because my mother was kind of like this very strong, independent, empowered woman. And I didn't want to let her memory down. I wanted to be strong like her. I didn't want to be seen as weak. So the backstory to that is that I lost my mother when I was 19 years old. And when I lost her, we were told, like I was told, specifically being the eldest sibling, that I needed to be strong because now I am taking over the role of caregiver. I'm the eldest in the family. I have to be responsible for everything that goes around, you know, in the home. I have to look after my sisters. I have to protect my siblings. I have to be strong for my father, who's just lost his life companion. And it's not something that I really thought about. I just took on that role. It was kind of like some, I didn't have time to think about anything with all the havoc and chaos in the house with people coming around to pay their respects. And my younger sibling was actually 13 years old when my mum passed away. So I was quite mindful that I didn't want her to see me being upset. And I didn't really want her to be, I didn't want any of them to see me upset. And I didn't want my dad to see me upset because me seeing my dad cry or get emotional would just break me. So, I had to be, I kind of embraced that protectiveness and that being surrogate mother, even though I was a motherless daughter myself. So I didn't, navigating life, navigating my own personal life, my work life, my home life. I just went with the flow. I took control of my life. So as long as my life was in control and it was orderly, I was okay. Life was a little bit easier when I left and went to uni because that was kind of like an escape route for me where I didn't have to think about anything. I could just be another person that hadn't had the loss of a parent. I didn't have that loss. So I was just another person. I was just a friends to my friends and having fun and whatever. And everything was going quite smoothly, actually. So, everything went smoothly. I got married. Life was okay. I started looking into having a family. When I had my firstborn sadly passed away. And I remember when I came back from the hospital and I went to hug someone, and I remember them saying to me, "Oh, you need to be strong, Sam." Now, I know their intentions were really well because a lot of people, when they say this, their intentions aren't in a bad place. But I froze. For me, that was kind of like, you need to be strong, and, that's it. So that protective, that guard just came up, sorry. And I went into that, I have to be strong mode. Luckily, I could share my emotions with my husband, who's going through the same kind of thing as well, but I still couldn't show my siblings or anyone else around me that I was upset. I was just this strong person. And you know what? I'm going to go through this. I'm gonna handle it. But I was a mess behind closed doors. But I always had to be seen to be holding it together. Fast forward a few years after that, I gave birth to a child and he was diagnosed with Down syndrome. Now, my body recognized kind of like the whole scenario. I'm grieving a child that I was hoping to have, but now I have a child who's going to have a lifelong disability, and I'm going to have to protect him now for the rest of his life. I'm going to have to be strong now because I'm going to have to fight his corner. So again, that all came up, and I just went along with it. For me, it wasn't really trauma at that point. It was just life and life's experiences that had shaped me. So, like, how did grief impact me having to be so strong? Well, I guess I suppressed my emotions because I was always having to be in control. I spent a lot of I felt alone. I felt that there was nobody really there that would understand what I've been through because I didn't know anybody that had lost a mother and lost a daughter and had a child with a disability. I didn't know anybody. None of my friends had lost a parent. None of my friends had lost a daughter. So for me, it was like I felt alone. I also felt abandoned by my mother. So that's kind of like, you know, why did my mother pass away? Why isn't she here for me when I'm going through life's milestones? You know, I've had my children and I see everybody around me, their parents there taking care of them, making them lovely broths just to heal themselves. And I don't really have anybody to like, look after me. I've had to like kind of look after myself. So being strong. And as a result of all of that, I had kind of like an anger in me as well, because I felt hard done by, and with when I think about it, were these just a result of grief? No, I reckon a lot of it had to do with childhood trauma as well, the anger, the abandonment, a lot of suppressed emotions. So how did I figure all this out? I figured it out when I did the trauma program and I did the life events list. And when I tallied that up, I was gobsmacked because I was like, blimey, like, I was just ticking away because you don't actually think about all the stuff on the life events, do you? And it's when you like have to read them out. And then it was like, wow, like I've actually been through a lot. I mean, I have. And it made me reflect later on after I'd done it on each area that I'd ticked because it made me think back, but I didn't want to re-experience any of that and I didn't want to remember any of that. So even though I thought back, I tried not to think too much about it at that point. That was session 1 when we did that. So I didn't want to think too into it. And then when we went on to talk about the cluster symptoms, I resonated a lot. I had a lot of aha moments because the emotionally numbing myself from revisiting past events, I just didn't want to go there. I didn't want to think about it. It's just something that happened to me in the past, and that's that. I just didn't want to think about that kind of stuff. So, and then there was the hyperarousal. Now, with hyperarousal comes hypervigilance. And when we talk, for me, hyperarousal, it's also known as fight, flight, or freeze response, right? So, and it's usually triggered by your perceived threats or your emotions. So, for example, I'd get angry instantaneously. I've been known to be called, that I've got anger issues by my children, mum, you've got anger issues. I'd be generally irritable about the smallest of things, and you could read it on my face that I was annoyed, and it could start an argument with my husband, for example. If I was irritated, then I'd pick an argument with him and then it'd blow up into a full-blown argument. I would get startled by loud noises. Now, this is something that still happens to me. And that, I would say, comes off of hyperarousal to hypervigilance when you're scanning the environment for your threats. And then all of a sudden you hear a loud noise and you just get startled by it. And I still do that. I still like scream, where did you come from? Or, I still do that because I'm constantly scanning still, I used to read too much into situations. I would overanalyze the behavior of people and certain situations. I just read into it, make stories of what happened based on my perception. I was over aware of what people used to see and think. So that's another scanning your environment, right? And because of that, because of the constantly scanning your environment, I was always reluctant to go out and meet new people and, try new things because I was just tired of constantly scanning. I was just safe at home. That was my safe space. So I'll just stay at home. Now, I know like scanning of your environment and stuff, I mean, that could be seen as quite a normal reaction for some people, because obviously naturally you're going to scan your environment to make sure that you're safe. That's, you know, but when it starts to affect your life and affect, you know, every aspect of your life, that's when you kind of know that there's something not quite right. So yeah, so I did all of that, and so that was an eye-opener for me. And then when we went on to do the coping mechanisms, now in the past, when my coping mechanism was, if I ever felt that I lost my temper, I'll just go back in my bedroom and I journal it all out, and I'd write all my, you know, negative thoughts and all my angry thoughts, and it was all my perception, and it was all angry, 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 all negative. And I just, my self-talk to myself was always negative. It's almost like I used to gaslight myself. So I, you know, that it's me. You know, that's, maybe there's something wrong with me. Maybe I did something to, you know, like exaggerate you know, the situation. But I never felt good when I used to write my thoughts down. I always used to feel embarrassed, ashamed, guilt. You know, I was never, you know, I never felt good about myself. In fact, I used to feel anxious when I used to think back on certain scenarios. Oh, I said this wrong and I shouldn't have said that. And when I used to go out into certain gatherings, I used to prep myself and say, don't be a bitch, Sam. You know, you need to watch what you say. You know, you need to, you know, you need to be nice. And if you can't be nice, then don't say anything at all. But yeah, I used to have to do that. But then when I did the coping mechanisms with your course, Maya, it was kind of like, now I journal, but I journal with a purpose. I journal and I concentrate on my feelings. So it's kind of like an onion. I always use this analogy of an onion. I try and peel it layer by layer, and I try and get to the root of why I was feeling that way. You know, what was it about that feeling? Why am I feeling like that? And we talk a lot about root cause because, you know, trauma, you know, emotions and trauma, you know, they're all linked. And so I used to do that. And then I used to positively self-talk. So now I don't know if you've heard of the 3 C's. So I used to use that. The 3 C's is, oh gosh, I've got to remember the 3 C's now. Catch it, check it, change it. And so I used to use that. So that's always at the back of my mind. So when I know that a certain situation is about to arise, and this happens mainly with my husband because he really annoys me sometimes, right? I'll try and catch it, check it, and change it. And then I'll kind of like, you know, it's not worth it, you know, this battle is not worth it, and I'll just walk out. So, you know, that's kind of worked with me as well. And I go for long drives, or I just sit down and I just reflect as to, you know, what, you know, my emotions and stuff. Walking doesn't work for me, so long drives or even driving, dancing work. I just shake it off. And I've also got a little bucket, and I've named my bucket "Chuck It in that effing bucket." So if I'm feeling any anger, I just scrumple it all up and I just chuck it in my effing bucket, you know. So that makes me feel really, really good. So yeah. So that's kind of like that. The work that I've done you know, on myself, it didn't really happen overnight. It's taken quite a long time for me to carry on this journey. I started off as an NLP practitioner and I became a master. But when I did the trauma program, that's when it all started making sense. It was kind of like a jigsaw in my puzzle, you know. And then I trained to be an anxiety specialist so I can understand the feelings within my body. And it was just a jigsaw puzzle and it all came together. So like with all these things in my toolbox, I can now kind of like work forward from it all. But I still have I'm still human. I still have moments where I lose it. And, you know, I just learn from it. We're all work in progresses. I don't know if so we're all work in progresses, and it just never stops, you know. So I like to think that trauma doesn't define us. I like to think of, I'm going to use a washing machine analogy now. So sometimes when I'm feeling like emotions and, you know, anxious, if I'm feeling anxious, I think of a washing machine and all the clothes in the washing machine, and they're all like, you know, going all around. And, you know, once it's finished, I take out each item, I put them in the tumble dryer, it all swishes around. When it's all done, I take each item out, and each item represents an emotion, and I fold it and I deal with it and I reflect on it, and then I take the other item out and I fold it, and that way I've got this lovely pile of clothes. They're all you know, they're all nice, neatly arranged. They're still the same clothes in the tumble dryer, but I've just sorted them out, you know. So I use that. I like to think of that analogy sometimes when things are kind of like going all over the place. So like I'm kind of hoping what I've said has resonated with somebody, and I hope it hasn't triggered anybody. I'd just like to say one more thing. Healing from trauma is not about forgetting, but about finding the strength and reclaiming your power and moving forward with a heart that is stronger, not harder. My heart became hard. I actually hardened myself to a lot of stuff. So, yeah, so being stronger is different from being harder. And I'd just like to add, right, one more thing. If there's anything that I've shared and it has triggered anybody, I know we're going off on a break now, so please, I'd like you to take a moment out to just ground yourself in whatever way that you feel like doing. You can just sit and take it in, or you can shake it all out like I do, shake it all out, and just take a moment to just calm your feelings. And I'd like to finish off by thanking Jill and thanking Maya for giving me this wonderful opportunity for sharing part of my iceberg.
Thank you. No, absolutely fantastic, ladies. Round of applause. Again, what can I say to mean that you will say I'm not strong. I say you're amazingly strong. You know, I don't think there's any loss that's deeper and more tragic than your child loss. And, you know, thank you so much for being vulnerable and sharing that. You will see the comments are blowing up for you right now and the chat. So I really would love you to see that, because I think you should take that away. And thank you for the 3Cs. I'm sure many of us are going to have some questions on our Q&A panel of how do we change it? Do we just chuck him out or in the bucket, or do we change him quote annoyingly husbands or partners or whoever? Yeah, so yeah, that's going to be an interesting one. So many resonations there when you said that about the husband. But no, on a more serious note, thank you so much, Sam. It's been fantastic. And what a privilege to have you join our team and speak so highly of the program. When you have all of you here, all my facilitators, all my team, you've got skills from all different avenues. And when you know what, like I always say, there's no one size that fits all. Trauma is so, you know, such a methodology of different approaches, and when you can use your skills like that, Sam, to bring them all in together, I mean, what more could we ask for? So thank you so much. And yeah, we are going to head to a break, so thank you. I mean, we are trailblazing now. Normally you may have seen on the previous agenda that we were due to have another trailblazer and our facilitator, part of our team, Andrea. Fortunately, Andrea can't be with us tonight, and which is a real shame, because she's a true inspiration of courage. And she's been built from within, and she's been healing, you know, her past and truly growing and rising beyond trauma and her limits, and literally would want to take you on that journey with her. Unfortunately, she now can't be with us, but rest assured, as I've hinted and mentioned a number of times, we will be continuing this monthly with our awareness series, where you will get an opportunity to see Andrea. But I am very conscious that we have been sat on our backsides for a little while, and I'm sure many of you are desperate to go and grab a brew, go to the loo, do what you need to do. I'm rhyming. And yes, we will going to take a very short break, and then we will be back for our second half. So please stay with us, ladies. Honestly, we've got another 3 absolutely amazing, inspirational women that are going to be sharing with you. And they need to be heard too. You know, we are about empowering women. We're about bringing voices onto a platform. You know, we don't have this enough. There's already been a comment in the chat, beautifully said, about sharing stories and being vulnerable. And it's that word vulnerable that's really important, because we do have to be strong, and we do have to go out there, and we have to put our masks on, and we have to do our chores and our kids, and we have to come home, and we have to be everything that we're supposed to be. But you know what? It's about time we have platforms where we can bring our stories that have defined us and made us who we are. And we bring our stories on a platform for change and empowerment and hope, and for women that can sit there and say, I feel you, I hear you. So that is what we want to do in the second half. So go grab a brew, and we will see you back here in just under 5 minutes. Welcome back, ladies, and I hope you are all feeling empowered and fearless, and you've at least stretched your legs a little tiny bit. And I do really appreciate the time that you're spending with us this evening. I know it's late, and it's that close to the end of the week, so we're all getting that kind of end of the week slump. But thank you for your time. And again, thank you for our amazing 3 speakers that have been vulnerable and shared with us this evening. But without further ado, just like our next speaker, who is also extremely, extremely courageous, who has healed her trauma, and she is now empowering others to embark on that healing journey. And what a fearless woman she is too. And that is no less than our wonderful Shaheen Khan, who will be our next speaker.
Thank you, Maya, and thank you for the opportunity to be here today. And thank you, ladies, for being here today. Assalamu alaikum to everybody. Okay, so ladies, I'm going to start with just a little bit about myself. So as a holistic therapist and a hijama practitioner and an NLP coach, I'm always learning to gain more knowledge to better myself and help women with their health and well-being. I came across Mayameen's trauma-informed workshop, which gave me an insight to trauma and the symptoms of trauma. And I never thought I had trauma, because I was always told myself, I am strong, I'm patient, and I don't have trauma. But whilst on the workshop, I realized that my anxiety, because I always suffered from anxiety, it was linked to my past traumas, which I had suppressed, and it came up as an anxiety. Whenever there was a stressful situation, I would get anxiety, which was palpitations, sweaty hands, erratic breathing, being all panicky. So I reflected on my anxiety and when it all started and what had caused it. The first time I remember was when I was 9 years old, and I witnessed an incident of a childhood friend which was getting bit by a vicious dog, which caused me so much fear. And that's when my anxiety started, because I was always so fearful, and I couldn't play outside on my own or go to the corner shop on my own, because every time I saw a dog, I just thought I would get attacked. and my anxiety would get triggered. And then after that, it was when my dad, when he had a tragic incident, and that was when I was 13 years old. He got burnt whilst working underneath a car, and he was critical for 24 hours. And I kept thinking, if he doesn't pull through, I will lose him. But my dad, he did pull through, alhamdulillah. But the effect that it had on me was massive. And I was 13 years old at that time. But again, I thought, okay, I've got over it, it's fine. I always thought my anxiety as a person that's who I am as a person who just reacts that way. And I'm an anxious person. And I would always tell myself, I have to be strong. I have to keep going. And I remember the time when I really had to suppress my emotions was when I actually lost my dad. And then I lost my mum. And I experienced emotional numbing, which I didn't know at that time. I only realized it was emotional numbing till I attended the trauma recovery course. I realized that I had trauma that had to be healed, because I had always thought you've just got to be strong, you have to be patient, and then you get through it. That's all I ever knew. So when I got the opportunity to join the BeyondTrauma 7-week recovery course, I thought I have to join this course because I'd done the trauma-informed workshop. As whilst I was on the course, I was going through a challenging time. At that time, I was experiencing a loss, and I wasn't too sure if I was going to share that today with you ladies, that what loss I was experiencing, but I am going to share. The loss that I was having was a miscarriage at that time, but I decided I would keep attending the course, and I'm so glad I did, because it gave me the coping tools, the coping mechanism tools to get through. And those 7 weeks, I think they came, it was at the right time, and I'm so glad I did attend. One of the techniques that I learned was the drop 3 technique, which helped me a lot. And I still use it when I feel the anxiety that comes up. If it's coming up, my anxiety, I'll use that technique. But now my anxiety is not like it was before. So I don't feel palpitation anymore. I don't get the sweaty hands anymore. And I add in the deep breathing, which helps me to keep myself calm, and I ground myself. I imagine my safe space, which I call my happy place, and I add in the affirmations. So these are my coping mechanisms, which have helped me so much. And I'm so glad that I've learned these coping mechanisms on the trauma recovery course. So I completed the course. I'm so glad I did. And after completing the course, I decided to become a BeyondTrauma Facilitator. And I know I've made the right decision, because I want to help women to heal their traumas just like I have, and to start the healing. I want the women to start their healing journey like myself and change their lives like I have done. And I feel so much in control of myself. And I know if the women can heal themselves, they can all change their lives around, and they can be in control. You can be in control of yourself. And these coping mechanisms, and this is just one coping mechanism, but the course is just amazing. And I feel, so I'm still on the healing journey, and I'm still changing myself, but I feel a lot more confident, and I have more self-esteem as well. And I have a lot more control, self-control. And I feel as though that any women, you can heal your traumas, and you should be healing your traumas, because I used to, they are emotions, are locked up emotions which need to be released.
Oh, Shaheen. Thank you. Don't know, you do need to have an opportunity as well, Shaheen, to have a look in the chat, because I know it's been difficult for you as well, especially showing, like you say, you're on that journey still. And
Yeah,
it is a never-ending journey, isn't it?
it
You
is.
know,
Yeah, and you're always healing yourself, and it is a healing journey.
yeah. And you know what, you know, with you, Shaheen, and you can sense it, you know, you're still there, but you're doing such amazing work. And that, you know, and that you've been able to bring in your professional and your personal. But one thing that, you know, people who have come through here and who know Shaheen know that you're very much about that physical as well. So your hijama and your cupping and your massage and all of that physical trauma that's really trapped within the body. And especially, as you say, when you've experienced a miscarriage like you have, and you know, what a moment to have experienced it whilst you was in the trauma recovery program on your own healing journey. And actually, what strength, because many people would have been like, I quit, I'm done, I'm not going. Why would I be going to on a program and going out, you know, and trying to study and understand trauma when I'm literally in the midst of it? Like, that's the last thing I want to be doing. I mean, did you
Yeah.
feel like that as well, Shaheen? Like,
Um,
why am I even bothering?
I was thinking at that time, shall I carry on or shall I
Mm,
not? So I was like, but no, this probably will help me through it. At that time, I
yeah.
was thinking, no, I need to be home. I just need to stay home, and I just need to just stay home, and I don't want to talk to anybody. I just wanted to curl up and not do anything. But I said to myself, no, you started this course, and you were really keen to start it. Well, why are you not going to complete it? So I continued. And I'm so glad I did, Maya. It was
Mm,
amazing. Every week I was healing.
mm.
Every week I felt as though I would learn something new and another coping mechanism. And I kept saying to myself, this course has come at the right time.
Interestingly, whilst you're going through one of probably the worst experiences that, again, as mums,
And I think,
especially, that we could ever go through.
I think my family thought I was a bit mad. What am I doing?
Yeah,
Like, you need to be
yeah.
home. You need to be resting. You need to be. I was like, no, I'm okay. I want to do this course, and it's something. It was like as it was. I was having, it was my own private a session that I was having with the sisters, and it was a healing session.
Mm.
So
Yeah, anyone who's been on the program will know that it is more of about, even for facilitators like myself, it's like it's our therapy. So
it
like we
did
just
feel
get
like
into
it, yeah.
that. Like, we share our stories. And for those that haven't been on the program, you are going to get that opportunity, because some of our fantastic facilitators this evening are giving away some of those prizes for you to have that free opportunity to join what we're sharing. So if you're thinking, what is this program? Do not worry, you will soon be learning about it. And if you've been on it, you know, it speaks for itself. People that have been on it come as facilitators, and that's what we want. We want lived experience. We want people to be able to be real. You know what, no more top down malarkey, no more sitting there and like having to speak to somebody, you know, and turning around and feeling like nobody can be empathetic with you, nobody can resonate with you. We are literally grassroots, down on it. We're going to get it done. So thank you so much, Shaheen. And you know what, you're a woman to be reckoned with. So everybody watch this space, because you know Shane is definitely going to be a powerhouse woman that can show you how to heal. And what's so beautiful about this is that you are bringing your lived experience into it, that you are bringing those different traumas that people will hopefully be able to resonate, because you know, I wouldn't be able to resonate with that loss of a child, and you know, inshallah, God willing, I wouldn't have to experience that. But the fact that we have, people on our team that have been through these different walks, these different life events, these different journeys that can resonate. So thank you so much, Shaheen.
Oh, thank you so much,
being with us
Maya,
this evening.
for this opportunity, and Jill as well. Thank you so much. I know how much hard work has gone into this. It's amazing.
We're halfway there.
Yeah, and it's amazing listening to everyone's, and all the team as well are here. So it's amazing. It's so glad, so grateful for the opportunity, Maya.
No, Angie, thank you so much. Thank you, Shaheen. Okay, so as you can see, ladies, we are firing ahead, and we do have some more speakers for you. And you know what? This for me just kind of sums up what it should be about. It should be about embracing everybody's experiences, embracing our vulnerabilities, and sharing and having that platform to do so. Because you know what? We're all on it together. And unfortunately, within the society that we're living in, we are all more isolated than we've ever been before. I mean, it's great in some ways because look, we're bringing you these inspirational people and to share stories. But you know what? We are isolated, and I can see there's some comments coming up in the chat actually, and some questions about that. About our family members. How do we share these traumas? Mental health we know is a taboo subject, but actually trauma is more taboo than you'd ever actually recognize, because it's one of those things with trauma, like I said earlier, where the mask comes on. So we get up in the morning and we drop off the kids to school, and we come home and we do the cooking and we do the chores and we do what we're supposed to be. We do what's expected of us whilst we're holding on to whatever we've been through, whatever trauma we've been through, whatever life event, whatever loss, whatever bereavement, grief, abuse that we've experienced, abandonment, and all of these inspirational stories that are being shared tonight have formed who we are. And unfortunately, it doesn't matter at what age you feel that you've blocked it and boxed it, it will filter out. And if you don't know how to manage that when that filters out, that's where, as many of the ladies that shared with you tonight will say, it impacts your life, it takes over your life, and that's where it becomes a problem. But with trauma, like I said, it's so much harder because you're going up and down, and you have all these different trauma responses. 1 minute you're angry and you're buzzing, next minute you're low and you're depressed. So you don't know if you're coming or going. You feel like you're going crazy. Is it depression? Is it anxiety? What is it? And it's about understanding it and learning it and knowing it. It's going to be able to help you through your journey. And that brings me to my next speaker, and what an incredible woman she is. And just like Saida and Ruby, Nazi is one of my beginning facilitators. Again, she's been on the journey with me since 2021, oozing with determination, and has a story of her own. And actually, again, was in one of my programs specifically. So I've had the pleasure of watching her journey from there to here. And to be honest, Nazi has grown in so many ways. It would take too long for me to share it, and I'd take up your whole entire summit just sharing how much she's grown and what she's done. But what I am proud to say, and what I'm proud to see, is how she has literally turned her scar into a story. Now she's helping you to rewrite your story. But more beautifully, she's been able to gain qualification and education, certificates. And so not only has she grown through her scars of her trauma, she's grown in her career because of her trauma. So without further ado, Nazi, it's over to you.
Yeah, thank you for such a lovely, wonderful introduction. I feel so special. And thank you for organizing this summit. And thank you for all those who are attending tonight. And I feel very honored to be speaking here to all of you tonight and sharing a bit of my story of how I actually reached here. So I'm just going to dive right down into it now. So I moved to Pakistan, Lahore, back in 2000, and I raised my children there for 18 years. So for 18 years, I lived in Pakistan. My husband was still working in the UK and was traveling back and forth. And I was living in a very large family, which was challenging at times, but overall my experience was a positive one. Towards the end of 2017, my daughter became very ill, and it was a very worrying and stressful period. But Alhamdulillah, she got the right treatment and was on the road to recovery. And although I was dealing with a lot on my own, I felt like I was in control and I had it all together. And, you know, being strong was my superpower. And I was always known to be resilient and strong and, strong enough to deal with anything on my own. And I didn't really need any support or any help. And, I wore that cape very proudly. I was very proud of that. So in 2018, I started feeling very overwhelmed and very exhausted. Every time someone would call my name, my heart would start racing. If my kids called out to me, if anyone just said mum or they called out my name, my heart would start racing and I would feel like something bad's about to happen. I constantly felt like, something was about to happen. I was always hyper alert, looking out for danger. Um, and when I went out, God, talking about this is it really kind of brings it back up in your body, doesn't it? Although it's been years. Um, when I used to go out, I used to feel like I was being followed. And I even started getting paranoid that I would be shot in the back. Um, it was really scary and it was really confusing. And it wasn't something that I could explain to anyone either. Because explaining something like that, like when I go out, I feel like someone's gonna, kill me or someone's after me. They're just gonna think, oh my God, what's wrong with you? And I don't have any answer for it. I don't know how. And especially in Pakistan, where people jump to all sorts of conclusions about you if you say anything like that. At one point, I even thought someone had done black magic on me because it was really hard to explain how I was feeling and more so why I was feeling. I couldn't understand because, I was strong and I had everything together. I didn't feel like I'd gone through anything. So it was very confusing. But at that time, when I was going through this, it was the little things that would really start me off. I would start crying. I remember once my husband bought a loaf of bread and I just started crying. I started bawling my eyes out. I was like, this is not enough for the kids. And I felt like, my kids were gonna, die of hunger or something. There was so much going through me. Once somebody came and because we were living in a large, extended family, and someone came up to borrow my iron. And I was giving it to her, but then I started crying. I was like, I need it back in one piece. You have to give it back to me. And it was like a kid. I was like a kid. And I just couldn't understand it. Nobody else could understand it. It was, it was very, very confusing. And I had outbursts of rage over any small disagreements, and these were usually targeted at my husband. The rage was always focused on him, and this was all out of character. For me, it just wasn't me at all. Nobody knew how to deal with me, and everyone started to avoid me in case something, set me off, including my husband, who was very worried and very scared for me. But nobody knew how to deal with me. They knew that it was because the stress I had gone through with my daughter's illness. But then that was about it. And I didn't know, they didn't know. So I began to feel very isolated and very confused. I went to see a psychiatrist who prescribed sleeping pills and relaxants. And but there was no answers. I went and told him how I was feeling, and he couldn't really explain what was happening. And he said, you just need to relax and sleep more and you'll be feeling better. So by now, I think I had just become emotionally numb. My turning point was, I think it was just one day I was lying in my bed and I was totally numb and I was lying there looking up at the ceiling and I heard someone open my bedroom door and kind of like, take a peek at what I was doing or what state I was in. Was I laughing? Was I crying? Um, they just came in, took a peek, and they saw me just lying there, and they closed the door and they left. And I think it was, it's probably one of my kids who just come to check up and see if mum's okay. And this is what my life had become. Like everyone was just tiptoeing around me, and I think it was in that moment that I decided that this is not how I want to live. I don't want to be dependent on medication and, not even knowing what's wrong with me. I quickly became known as someone with mental health issues. Like word had got around, and there's something wrong with her mentally, and I think she's taken she was stressed because of her daughter, and but it wasn't in a very kind of like a compassionate way, because in Pakistan, women having mental health issues is kind of interpreted as someone who's either had black magic done on them, is in an abusive relationship with the husband or the in-laws, or the husband is having affairs because she's not a good enough wife. So there's a lot of shame and stigma attached to that kind of like label of having mental health issues. So that summer, I was coming back to the UK, 2018. So, after 18 years, I was moving back. And I was moving back and I thought, I feel better. It's going to be a fresh start. And, I came back, but nothing kind of like changed internally. I felt much more isolated. I moved to a new town, so not where I'd grown up. So I was in a new town. I didn't know anyone. And then I just became more isolated, and I eventually like felt too scared to leave the house. This continued for a year until finally in 2019 I plucked up the courage to see my GP and explain how I felt. And honestly, it was just so hard going to the GP because I didn't know what I was going to say, and I didn't want to come across as crazy because that's how I felt. Like what I felt was very, very real. But I couldn't explain it. And I was feeling the same way that I was feeling while I was in Pakistan. So that was really kind of like, it was very scary and very confusing. But when I went to the GP and, she asked a lot of questions and I told her, everything that had happened. And then she diagnosed me with PTSD. And I wasn't really sure what that meant. But I was just so relieved to finally have a name to what I was feeling. It was such a relief. I was then put on a 9-month waiting list for therapy. But 9 months, no way, I was not going to wait around that long, especially now that I knew what I was dealing with or what I had and had been diagnosed with. So I was like, I can't wait around for 9 months. I did my research and I found Mayameen, and I found her 7-week trauma recovery course. And it was like a godsend. I just signed up there and then on the spot. So when I signed up and when I started, I think it was in November 2019. That was when I started. And I'm not kidding when I say this, but in the first session of the course, everything that I had been silently suffering from, was there in writing, and it all began to make sense. And it was like, the clouds have parted. And it's like light coming through, and it was like light coming through. I was so relieved that I wasn't going mad, because that's how I felt, and I just felt totally broken and beyond repair. I was like, I can't get better now. Like, look at me, look at what age I'm in, and there's no hope. Um, so on the course, I remember, Mayameen, when we did the cluster symptoms, and one of the cluster symptoms was uh, hypervigilance, right? Because your body's in survival mode and your brain's looking out for danger. And this kind of like, really explained why I felt unsafe when I'd go out, and I felt like I was being followed or something bad was going to happen. So once I understood that, I was like, oh God, thank God, like this is what it is. Another cluster symptom was anger, and that explained the rage. And anger, I was a very angry person, so anger was one of my main like coping mechanisms. Um, and with this course, I learned so much about myself and how much emotion I had suppressed in my body since childhood. So this didn't start in 2017 when my daughter was ill. Like I had thought that was the cause of whatever was happening. Um, but it was, this had all been suppressed in my body since childhood. And it's like an invisible rucksack that you carry around with you full of suppressed, emotions like, anger, fear, sadness, guilt, and shame. And then you finally learn how to release and acknowledge them and release them in a safe space. So literally, when I say that this course, it transformed my life, like there's so much more to it, but I would take all night just talking about this. And it really did transform my life. And I really want to thank you, Mayameen, for creating this course and helping me become the person that I am today. I'm honored to be a facilitator and help women navigate their way through PTSD in a safe environment. And I've had, ever since I've become a facilitator, I've had amazing feedback and testimonials from clients who have been in all ages, from like their 20s to their mid 50s, who've completed the course. I've delivered this course in Urdu, Punjabi, as well as English, and I've had clients from different parts of the world, including Australia, Maldives, Dubai, Pakistan, and it's gone global. It's definitely gone global. Um, and I just like to say to everyone who's listening that it is never too late to get help and heal. It's never too late. I was in my mid 40s when this started, and I'm going to be 50 in December. And I honestly feel like my life has just started. Um, it literally feels like I've been given a new lease of life since becoming a facilitator, or since doing your course actually, and actually like kind of like understanding what's been happening all my life. I then went on to become a narcissistic abuse specialist, and then a pre-practitioner, brain spotting practitioner. I can't remember what else, but there's so many things that have, I've gone on to do. And this is from someone who I had so much, self-esteem issues and confidence, because when I was younger, like for some reason, which I wouldn't be able to explain now, but I was taken out of school when just after I'd done I think the 12 plus was it. So I didn't go to secondary school, and I was literally taken off the radar, taken to Pakistan for a whole year. And when I came back, that's it, and I was told that, oh, you need to stay at home because, your mum's ill and everything. But it wasn't that. There was other reasons behind it. And I can now understand why, my father made that decision. But at that time, it just totally kind of like, it just closed me in. And now looking back, when I see like, because I always used to think, I don't have any qualifications and I can't say, I can't do anything and I'm not good enough. And after doing your course, and it just sort of like, I think that was just like, that was so transformational for me. It just like opened up so many avenues and doors for me, like, because I had a passion for helping women, Mayameen, just like you do. And I really wanted to help women. And I think I've always wanted to do that, but I think God had plans for me where He had to totally break me and then remake me, and to become who I've become today. And I do feel like now that I'm actually living and not existing, because I was never in the present moment. I think I was always in a dissociated state in my life, and that's one of the cluster symptoms as well. In a dissociated state where I couldn't, I was just like a totally different person. I couldn't feel anything, and not feeling happiness and not feeling sadness and grief, and like shutting myself off from that. I was shutting off myself to the positive emotions as well. And looking back, I'm thinking like, I've gone through this, I've had it all my life, and I didn't know. I had anxiety all my life, and I didn't know, because it was just, for me, I never knew anything else. And so that's why up until the point where I had the breakdown, I didn't think there was anything wrong. I just thought this is how people are, or this is how, people live. Or maybe everyone feels like that on the inside. And on the outside, I was a very kind of like, I was a very confident person. But in the inside, it was a totally different story. So, yeah, so coming out of that, and, just now I can like really just be myself and be who I am. And I always have this, like, I always pray that, please God, don't take me away now, because I've only just started to live, and I want to help more people. I want to help more women. And I always pray that, Allah doesn't take me just right now. Just give me a few more years. Let me do some more work. Yeah, so that was my story.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for listening,
Wow.
everyone.
Round of applause, everyone, for Nazi. You've certainly brought some tears to my eyes this evening, because you you're still, like you say, you're on that journey, and now you're just starting it, and now you're just writing your story, and your chapters are ones of past. But do you know what, Nazi, as you said, you've come so far, and you know what, you've just shared so vulnerably as well, so thank you so much, because you're right, it's always taboo, but let alone in cultures, and in villages, like you say, where mental health, what's wrong with you, and why are you in bed all day, and why don't you just move, and why don't you just be grateful, and why don't you just do this, and like you say, it was just so
Yeah,
normal. What do you
yeah. I
can't
think,
know what you
Maya,
don't know.
the bit that you say about being grateful, because when I was living there, and if I kind of mentioned to someone that I just don't feel any happiness, or I don't feel any joy, or I just feel really dead inside. And they would say to me that you've got an amazing husband, your kids go to the best schools in Lahore, you've got driver, you've got cook, you've got maid, and you're feeling like that. So there was a lot of shame attached to that, like I should be grateful. And I just felt like such an ungrateful cow, and they just sent me into sort of like, deeper kind of shame, and I couldn't say anything, I couldn't explain. So, the symptoms of PTSD are so unexplainable.
Yes.
They're
Yeah.
very hard to explain. And it's not like I was in a depressed state. I'd be doing everything normally. I was the life and soul of the party. So everyone saw me as, this confident woman who's raising her kids in Lahore, come from England, so strong, and her husband's like back and forth. So he wasn't with me constantly, but I was just managing things on my own. But inside it was just such a different story. I was a totally different person. And that is it's a very confusing state to be.
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
very confusing state to be. And I remember just being miserable and irritable and angry. And, then it finally just, like, I just became emotionally numb.
Yeah.
And I remember
And that's
quite
it, isn't it? It's those
a lot
different
of
states, and that is what makes it so complicated. And you know what, to get that diagnosis is so difficult, as we know as well. So people are just like walking around like really confused and not knowing, like you say, is it depression? Is it anxiety? What is it? And you know, it's what we say, you know, if you don't know, or what do you know, you know? No, thank you so much, Nazia. I mean, the journey has just been incredible. I mean, and then when you say like 2019, I'm like, wow, it feels like forever ago. But you've just come through such a long journey, and you are a powerhouse, as the chat's going wild for you, as so it should. Is you've achieved amazing things, you know, and I'm glad you touched upon the education side of it as well, because like you say, that's opened the door to you to be able to progress and to find your niche and your specialism, and to be able to, you know, the fact that you can even speak so many different languages is an inspiration in itself, because you know, us English like myself, we're a little bit lazy, speaking for myself personally, and language isn't even a thing. But you know what, you've achieved so much, and like you said, you're at an age, you know, where people will be thinking, oh, it's time for me to settle down now, and I just put up with my ways and my thinking and my thoughts and my behaviors. But actually, like you said, it's about rewriting that story anytime. So I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart, Nazi. I mean,
thank you, Maya.
you're a
Thank
woman
you.
of many words, and I'm just so honoured and proud to have you. And I'm so glad to see you shine as much as you deserve, and hopefully many more shining to be done in the next couple of months, when we're going to start getting us all out there and getting you ladies all visible, because you deserve to be known. So thank you so much, Nazi.
Looking forward
Thank
to
you.
it. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for listening.
Wow. Okay. So what can I say? What can I say? What can I say? I think I'm literally running out of vocabulary, which, you know, anyone who knows me knows that I don't often have nothing to say. I can put the world to rights and I can speak for England, but right now I am running out of the vocabulary to use for these amazing, amazing women that I am so proud and honoured to be on a journey with. But we are coming to the end of the evening. And do not forget, we will be taking just a very short break, before we do our Q&A session. Just a couple of minutes to give you legs a little bit of a mover. And then obviously we have our Q&A session as well. So please put some questions in. And even if we can't answer them in tonight's summit, we will be answering them in the group as well. And our facilitators, our wonderful women speakers, will be available to answer some of those questions for you as well. So that brings us on to, again, I'm running out of vocabulary. I mean, how can I explain this one? Again, another person, a woman inspiration that's been on the journey with me, just not long after Ruby and Nazi joined the journey. And she is absolutely incredible. I mean, she's truly a remarkable woman who has also used her journey of very much shared trauma and losses as well. And she is, you know, she's helping others who are unbreakable like she is. And she truly is unbreakable. And she has some serious words of wisdom. So without further ado, and definitely last but nowhere near the least, is our beautiful, wonderful Saida.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. I you know, Maya gets paid, is going to get paid for every nice word that she's sent my way. But seriously, it's the first time I've actually heard everybody's stories like properly. I think we've heard kind of snippets of the stories, but not fully like this. And I was, you know, I thought, you know, I'm gonna, you know, I'll have it on and I'll get my things done. But I was literally glued for the entire time. But subhanAllah, like there's so much inspiration and so much motivation and so much strength that's coming from these ladies. And I think it's, and I think the whole thing about talking about, you know, these difficult moments and these taboo subjects, I think is so important. And I think, I know with myself as well, I think by not being able to speak about it made it even harder to heal as well. because we saw the people around us keep their shit together. You don't have to use that language, but you saw them strong. And I think with our mothers as well, they just went through such difficult times and they just kind of held everything together. So you saw them as role models. And so when you were kind of going through your difficulties or you were going through your challenges, you felt, I can't complain about this. Like, my life is so much more easier than what they've been through. And that's probably why I do what I do. And I talk about my own challenges and my own struggles, because sometimes we think that it's showing a weakness, but actually through your weakness, people actually find the strength, and they actually look at you and they think, oh, she went through it, and she looks so strong, and she looks like as if she's got everything together, and she's gone through it, and she's went through such a difficult time, or she hit, rock bottom, and she's picked herself up from that. And so I think it's so important for us to speak about, the vulnerable moments that we go through those dark night of the soul that we can call it. It's so important for us to talk about that, because we kind of shine the light for others. So, and you probably agree with, and I'm sure all the women will agree here, that the first time that you spoke about it was like you thought the ground was going to open up and swallow you, or day of judgment was going to come or something. It was like, this is it, life is going to end, if I share my pain and my struggles and my sorrows and those parts of me that I'm holding on so tightly, and even not even acknowledging to myself. So yeah, I'm really, really blown away by, all the amazing stories that the women have shared. And inshallah, I want to share, a snippet of my story. And mine starts, I would say, even though I say it starts in 2017, I think, like most of us, we realized that it was probably the turning point, but there was so much trauma in the past as well. So in 2017, I gave birth to my youngest, my son, unexpected pregnancy, baby 5. It's not cool to have 5 children, or so I thought. So it was like, no, this shouldn't be happening. But anyway, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed me, and I went through that whole, trying to keep myself calm and accepting God's will. And alhamdulillah, my pregnancy was difficult, and then my delivery was even more difficult. I got flu just before, like they asked me, do you want the flu jab? And I was like, no, I never get the flu. But lo and behold, I got the flu during my pregnancy, and I couldn't obviously then have the jab. But I got the flu, so I was really unwell. I was struggling to breathe. I went into the hospital, and they had to induce my labor. My labor was quite difficult, and to be honest, all my labors have been quite difficult, so this kind of seemed normal for me. But then there was a few complications, and they had to rush me into emergency C-section. And I'd had a C-section before, so I was kind of familiar with that. So they rushed me into a theatre, and alhamdulillah, I gave birth to my son, and I came out of surgery, and I was still very unwell because I had the flu, and I couldn't hold my baby. Like, I'd never had this experience before, but, the doctors had their masks on. This wasn't during COVID. They had their masks on. They had the aprons on. They had like these special curtains around me. I couldn't hold the baby. So it was quite a really strange kind of environment to have, to have had this baby, to have my son. So as my family's kind of leaving, and my sister-in-law was standing there, and she was kind of the last one to come in to see me. I wasn't feeling so great, and I remember touching the bed, and as I'm like kind of touching the bed, I felt like it was wet, and as I lifted my hands were full of blood. So I'm like, why am I bleeding? So they called the doctor. And actually, no, the nurse came, and the nurse checked one of my stitches. She checked a stitch. She cut one of the stitches just to check, and this gush of blood like literally just like came out of me. So again, I was like in a state of shock, like, why am I bleeding? And then it was just all kind of panic stations. The doctors are kind of running about. They're trying to get me ready for surgery again. I was hemorrhaging. I didn't realize at the time, but I was hemorrhaging. And so they rushed me back into the theatre. And before they rushed me into the theatre, you know, they made my husband sign like the form that they were going to try everything to kind of save my life. So, you know, I'm like really confused, thinking, what has happened here? Like, why am I being rushed back into surgery? But I knew it was something quite serious. So they put me on the operating table, and I'm seeing all of this mad panic around me. And, you know, that moment kind of, you know, your life kind of, you know, flashes by, all the scenes of your life flash by. And here's me thinking, this is it. Like, I'm going to actually die here, like on this operating table, leaving five children behind. Like, who would have thought? You know, I had so many plans, I had so much potential, I had so many things that I needed to do that I knew that I should have done, I could have done, but this is it. This is the end. You know, this is what I'm going to leave behind. And you know, as the doctor's trying putting me to sleep, putting the oxygen mask over my face, there was a moment where I literally just wanted to like push his hand away, because I needed a moment just to pause and reflect and just kind of gather my thoughts. But obviously it was, you know, the situation was, it was an emergency situation, and they needed to operate on me. And so in that moment when they're putting me to sleep, the only thing that I'm uttering inside my heart is like, astaghfirullah, like, Ya Allah, forgive me. Ya Allah, forgive me. Ya Allah, forgive me. And that's what I'm uttering. And they put me to sleep. But alhamdulillah, you know, I woke up from that surgery. The surgery was successful. I was still really unwell. I had, you know, I was pumped with morphine. I had like wires coming out of me. I was on oxygen. I couldn't get up, because apparently they'd kind of inflated a balloon inside me and, you know, pumped it with water so that it compresses, you know, wherever you're hemorrhaging from. And again, like I said, it's not an experience I'd had before or I'd even heard about. So my stomach looked like as if I was still carrying a baby. So like, you know, I was so confused. I couldn't hold my baby. I couldn't get up. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't cough. I couldn't go to the bathroom. Like literally, I was just on the bed for days. And I'm so confused, trying to make sense of how coming into hospital to have a baby and then going home the next day turned into this like 10 days being in hospital, not being able to function at all. Anyway, so after a few days of, you know, like getting a little bit, feeling a little bit better, I wanted to know what had happened. And then I asked for the doctor to come in, who was the consultant who was part of my surgery. And I remember the words that he said. He just said, "Oh, Mrs. Bano, you're lucky to be alive." And then he said that, I, you know, obviously walked off. And then the nurse said, you know, that doctor saved your life and the other two doctors saved your womb. And so I was like, okay, alhamdulillah, you know, like you're kind of being grateful. And, you know, alhamdulillah, you know, I was grateful. After a few days, you know, the doctors were really surprised by my recovery. I ended up going home, albeit in a wheelchair. But I went home, and, you know, everyone's like so grateful. You know, you went through this really like difficult time. You went through this really difficult surgery, but alhamdulillah, you're fine. Kind of, let's get back to business. But I just couldn't go back to business, like. And yet, up until that moment, for 10 years, I've been home educating my children. And anybody who's home educated their children know how you constantly, like, it's like balancing act, isn't it? And you've got so many things going on at the same time. So I was used to that kind of pressure. But, you know, I was used to having a baby, coming home, getting on with home ed, doing my thing, whatever. And all of a sudden, I just couldn't do the basics. I couldn't just even get out of bed and function on a basic level around my family, to the point where I would like snap at my children. And the children, you know, I know the husbands have been getting it, but my children got it. So I would like snap at the children. I'd kind of just abandon the baby. I'd hand him over to the older ones, and I'd just kind of leave. I'd walk out of the house. I'd shout, scream, I'd swear, and I'd never ever swear at the children. I'd swear directly at the kids, and I'd just abandon them. I'd walk out. And then I'd sit on a park bench, or I'd sit in my car, and I'd cry. I'd cry like a baby. I felt like a really rubbish mother. I felt really guilty. And, I'd cry and cry and cry. Maybe I'd ring a friend, and then I'd go back home. I'd apologize to the children. I'd say, I'm really, really sorry. I'm going to be better behaved tomorrow. And then I'd go back and do the same thing the next day. And I did this for like weeks and months. And then I realized something's got to give. Like I wasn't doing justice to the kids. So then I made the really, really difficult decision of putting them back into school. I think that was the hardest thing I did. And I cried, and yet they were like, yes, we're going to school. And I think that upset me even more. But anyway, so I made some really like kind of big changes in my life. Then my kids went back to school, and I started to work on myself. Now, at this moment, I hadn't come across your program, but I just exposed myself to anything and everything to just keep me sane, because I couldn't understand what was going wrong. I couldn't understand why I had this explosive behavior, this explosive anger, even though I think Yasmin mentioned it, and I think a couple of others, about how you were known as the angry one. I was known as the angry bird. I was the one that was always losing her temper really, really quickly. But this was like next level. This was like rage. And I knew that I've done all of this effort with the children for 10 years, and I didn't want to ruin it basically with them. And I didn't want to end up doing damage to them that was irreversible. So I made the difficult decision of putting them into school, and I started working on myself, and I did anything and everything. I exposed myself to any material that was going to keep me afloat. I started meditating. You did a lot of breath work. I did a lot of somatic work, a lot of movement. I used to like put the headphones on, used to put music on, close the curtains, and dance and dance and dance to the point where the emotions would start coming out, and then I was crying by the end of it. So I was like, initially I was like, yeah, enjoying it. And by the end of it, I was probably on the floor crying my eyes out. I did a lot of meditation, waking up like at 3-4 o'clock in the morning and just trying to find my inner peace. I did a lot of affirmations, a lot of visualizations, finding my safe space. I was like, literally, like I said, I was exposing myself to anything and everything to keep me afloat. And after a year, alhamdulillah, I felt like I wasn't the old version. I was a better version of who I was, and I suppose an experience where you're kind of facing your own death does change you. It kind of makes you put a lot into perspective, makes you reflect a lot. It makes you question the way you've been living and the way you want to live and the kind of legacy that you want to leave behind. So I put a lot of things into perspective. I qualified as a coach, and then I started working with women. Now, when I was working with women, and alhamdulillah, I was benefiting them, and I was sharing a lot of the things that I'd kind of learned and the kind of tools that I'd learned and applied and implemented. But I didn't really have a proper method. Like I was just kind of try this and try this and try this. And I knew that there was something missing in my delivery, or there was something missing in my ability to help them. And that's when I reached out to Mayameen, and I said, because obviously everyone has trauma, even in the most benign everyday of life experiences. None of us can go through life without experiencing trauma and trauma affecting us. So I reached out to Mayameen and I said, is there any kind of trauma training out there? Because I wanted to, go on it so I could support my clients better. And that's when you mentioned your 7-week trauma recovery program at that time, which is now the BeyondTrauma Recovery Program. And then part of the facilitation, I had to go through all of that 7 weeks worth of material. And as I went on that material, I started to realize, oh my gosh, like these were the tools that I was using, but then you had the science behind it, the knowledge behind it, the structure behind it, which I absolutely loved, because it just makes it so much easier to, help an individual over a certain time frame with all of the content and all of the knowledge that they need to know and all of their tools that they need to implement. And then also we have the freedom to put in any tools that, that we found beneficial. And so that's when I until then, I didn't realize I had PTSD. It was only when I did the trauma recovery program with you, I was like, oh, right. Okay. That makes sense. Now, I think it was Nazi that mentioned about, when she went to the doctor and the doctor said, you've got PTSD. Sometimes, not sometimes, we actually need a name for it, because otherwise we're in this state of confusion thinking, what is wrong with me? Am I losing the plot? Is there a jinn? Am I being possessed? Am I just, am I going through perimenopausal symptoms and I'm like losing my marbles or whatever? But having that name being given to you just was like, oh, it was like the light bulb moment. So when I went on the program with you and I realized that's what I went through. I went through PTSD. And I think one of the comments was that we often think that it happens just to soldiers, it happens to people on the battleground, and it's not. It can happen to anyone. And it actually made me reflect and look back on the experiences in my own children as well, the experiences that they had, and then the behaviors that they were like displaying, how they actually have had PTSD or have symptoms of PTSD. And then when I talk about, I think Sister Samina said about, it wasn't grief or it wasn't trauma, it was just life. It made me reflect on my childhood and, especially those first like 7 years of your life when you are purely subconscious and there's no conscious, rational thought on all of those experiences that you have. And you look back at your childhood and your parenting and you think, oh my gosh, there was so much trauma there that I was, and so much symptoms of that trauma that I had, but then I had so many unhealthy coping mechanisms, or shall I say coping mechanisms, that kept me safe. But at the same time, like, for example, I was always anxious. I was anxious to the point where, because I always saw my parents in a very unhealthy marriage where any dispute led to really toxic behavior or really toxic attitudes, etc. So for me, any kind of a dispute or any kind of conflict meant end of marriage, or it meant it was going to be really drastic. So I couldn't even have just a basic disagreement with my husband, because I was always anxious that it's going to lead to something negative, like it's going to lead to an explosion. But because you're so hyper vigilant, you're so anxious, I kind of manifested that in my relationships anyway. So, and then it made me realize how I was carrying PTSD from my childhood, which then I took into my married life, which then I think with my experience with my son was like the wake-up call. It was like something has to change. But I'd been walking wounded for as far back as I could remember, like for decades. And it was normal to be anxious. Feeling anxiety all the time was just a normal way of living and being. It's only when you experience internal peace that you think, what was that all about? Like, how was I functioning from that place for years? And it was through like breath work and meditation that when I started to experience those moments of bliss and peace, that I actually realized that we can be in the dunya and actually have this internal space within us where we can find peace, and it doesn't have to come from the outside of us. Like, we don't have to be controlling of the people and circumstances outside of us. We can actually find that internal bliss inside of us when we heal ourselves and we heal our traumas. So yeah, alhamdulillah, I'm so grateful for being on. I think that it's being on the program or being part of the facilitators just gives you so much more like, yes, inshallah, we can do it. You know, like that collective, that community, that, you know, it's not just one individual. Like Mayameen, you said, like, you know, you want to leave that legacy behind so that you can continue to heal women even when you're no longer there. And I think that's what this community is about. And you know, there's so many questions I always have, and I'll message Mayameen, and mashallah, the woman does have the answers. You do know your stuff.
Do you know what, Saida? Honestly, you've blown the chat up. I mean, you've blown the chat up. Yeah. And I'm just like, you know, it's exactly what you've just said. We all know, like, we're a team and we come together so regularly, but we've never really shared like on this kind of platform and level. Like, I know snippets of what you've all been through, and you know, and that's I guess to one element, that's been the beauty of the program, right? Because we don't have to dig up our traumas. Okay, so you know, when people go on our program, we don't encourage them to share and disclose, because what we're trying to do is, you know, deal with the here and now, and we're very much about, let's not bring it all up at the past and drag it all up in that moment. So that's the beauty of the program, because they don't have to relive the trauma. But then obviously for us, it's like hearing those stories, like, wow, like, and even yours, I've not heard it to this level ever before. And yeah, you've just I mean, when have you ever known me not to have the words?
You're speechless for
like,
once.
Yeah, for once, like, I never knew. I've always heard, like, you've always shared little bits, like you've shared about your loss and, you know, and things that you've been through, but not to that level of that, like you say, just, it is every woman's worst nightmare with pregnancy. Like, and not only that, it's like you said, is just seeing it all rush around you and just knowing it. And then the reality that actually you are supposed to just get on and be normal. Like, you've just got to pick your shit up and just get on with it. Exactly. You said, you know what, Zayda? I mean, I introduced you as one of the most unbreakable women, and I just don't even think that comes close to
Oh,
who you are.
please, oh, calm down, woman.
Honestly, don't. You deserve everything.
Yeah, you should have seen me this afternoon when I was like kicking off with the kids.
So honestly, Zayda, I can't thank you enough for the vulnerability that you've shared. It's resonated so much in the chat, and it will resonate with anybody that's going to be watching it back. And you're just a true powerhouse, and we are so honoured to have you on the team. I love the way you're like, oh yeah, Maya's got the wisdom, while she sits there with wisdom, like, and we're all like this, wanting more and more. And inshallah, we will get more and more and more from Saida, because it's just the start. Like you said, it's the start of our journeys, it's the start of our visibility, and it's the start of showing really what you're all about. So I just can't thank you enough, and entrusting me on this journey. So literally didn't leave, you know, Zayda the least to the last. I mean, absolutely nailed the entire summit for us. So thank you so much. And well, we are going to go to a very short break. Very short break indeed, because I am conscious of your time, and we want to get straight to this Q&A panel, because I've seen some questions coming in. So I will happily now pass over to Jill. So Jill will be bringing all of our speakers back into our Zoom room, ready for our Q&A panel. Then once we've done the prizes, we will then just do our closing session to end the evening. And I want you all to be here for that, because we're just going to get off our seats and we're just going to do a little bit of an empowerment thing, because I'm sure our legs are all hurting. But let's bring our speakers back on to Zoom for our Q&A session. Ruby, if you are here, please come back in and put your camera on. Samina, Yasmin, Nazi, Saida, Shaheen, welcome. If you're still with us, I'm hoping you all are. Please feel free to come into the session together for our Q&A panel. Are we all here?
I think we are.
Brilliant.
Samina, can you put your video on, sweetheart?
I mean, it's not allowing me. It's saying host has blocked, host has stopped it.
There we are.
There you go.
There you go. Super. Right, we've got some questions, ladies. That was amazing. Your stories were absolutely breathtaking. Well done. So let's jump straight into the questions, because I'm aware that we're holding ladies up and it's late. So first question for you, Samina. Did you feel lonely dealing with too much on your own?
I did, yeah, I did actually. But I never really thought about it. I just got on with it. It's just
Yeah.
something, yeah.
I think as women we do, don't we?
Yeah, I think it was only later on, now that I've had time to reflect back on it, I did actually feel lonely. And because of that, that loneliness, I kind of like it all manifested in different ways. Like, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, next question is this one's for all actually. So for someone considering becoming a facilitator, what advice would you give to them as they start this journey? I'll open that up to all of you ladies.
I'd like to say that work on yourself, on your healing journey, and that's the best way we can help others. I think that was what I did, like, because I had the passion for helping women before any of this ever started. And looking back, I'm thinking I couldn't, if I was not in that kind of space if I hadn't healed, if I didn't know what was wrong with me, I wouldn't have been able to. So, going on that journey and really going inwards and, healing yourself and like being in that space, holding that space for other women, definitely do that first. And if they wanted to become a facilitator, obviously doing the 7-week course first, and then going on to becoming a facilitator, I would advise that.
Anybody
Yes.
else?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I would also say to trust the process, because we have a habit of judging. And oh, she didn't do that. Oh, they didn't talk about this and this. Let it happen, let it go, because it won't just heal one aspect of your lives. It'll touch on so many others. You're not going to know what's happened, and you'll start living fully if you let go into it. And you'll start going, oh, I didn't know this. Oh, didn't know that either. And then as that all starts merging together and becoming whole, you start becoming whole too.
I also just say that you need to be kind to yourself as well. You need to be gentle with yourself as you're going through the process, because lots of memories are going to come up and they'll impact you differently, and they'll come up at random times. So just be kind and gentle to yourself.
What I'd like to add is that if you are thinking about becoming a facilitator, that's kind of your cue, that's the kind of pathway you want to take. And if you're unsure, there are taster sessions for you to actually go into. That's how I went into it. I had a taster session. And when I went on there, I was like, there's no way I cannot have this in my toolbox. I need it. So if you are really thinking about it, that might be your cue to actually take a taster session or something.
Yeah, I agree, Grasmin. Yes, but nothing better than a taster session. Okay, the next one is for Maya.
Oh no.
What would you say to somebody who feels they are too broken or beyond help when it comes to trauma recovery?
See, this is a difficult one, because a few of you, even facilitators, have mentioned about how you saw yourself as unrepairable. This is just who I am. This is just how I'm born. This is just one life set up for me. So it's so difficult to be able to see outside of that. And we hear it a lot, even in the Facebook group, where women will be like, I'm just too far gone. But you don't know what you don't know. So you have that self-prophecy that you need to fulfill, that you are broken, irreparable, probably come from somebody telling you that, or your self-belief. and your core belief is that. But actually, without the knowledge that of what you've been through and what that does to you and the impact, how do you even know that you're too broken for anything? Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. I think
Because it goes back to what kind of the theme throughout the evening really is knowledge. It's not actually about healing, is it? It's not actually about the modality. It's not really about whether you're EFTing or EMDRing or NLPing or PTSDing or whatever ings and isms we want to add to the world of healing. It's actually about knowledge, right? It's those aha moments, and it's those moments of going, oh my God, I'm not as crazy as I thought I was. Actually, I'm not broken. Actually, that's not something wrong with me. So it's a very good question. I mean, you're saying in the group, in the chat, it's a very good question. It's a very difficult one, but it's also one that you're not going to know until you've got the knowledge. And I guess for me, that's what makes the program slightly different, because we all need to have a healing modality, like what Saida said, breathing, or whether it's a drop breath, or whether it is EFT or EMDR or just a talk in therapy. But actually, you need to know what you know in order to get there.
right answer. Another one for you, Maya.
God's sake.
Can you talk about how the Beyond Trauma program helps people without having to constantly relive their trauma?
Yes. So I think that goes back to what Saida and I were just saying, actually, isn't it, Saida, that even within us as a team, we don't know the depths of each other's stories. I mean, mine probably not so much. Let's take me out of the equation. But before that, you wouldn't have known the depths of my story, because that is what we preach and advocate for on the program. Because yes, there's a level of getting to that root, but it's about what that root is going to do to you. So if we're going to sit in a session and we're going to get you to go through the nitty-gritty details of what you've been through, and then we're going to send you on your way straight afterwards for you to go back into your day-to-day. So for you to go back into your home, where are you going to project that root? We're not ripping it out. The root has got to remain there. If we think about a tree, the root has to be there. Doesn't necessarily mean we have to see it. Doesn't mean we have to dig it out. We have to know what it is in order to keep watering the leaves and to let it grow, but we don't have to rip it out. So why should we have to keep reliving the trauma? Because regardless of how many times you relive it, you are never going to change it. And I say this, and I know facilitators, I hope you say this too, is that there is no word in the dictionary that says unhappen. It says it happened, but not unhappen. So we will never be able to take away your trauma. So why are we going to keep making you relive it? What benefit is that going to do for you? So for me, that is the whole point of the program. You can come on it and you don't ever have to disclose, but you're going to get the benefit of what you learn. Now, if you want to disclose, we don't have an issue with that, but we're not there to purposely do that. So sometimes when you go into therapy or healing, it is about speaking in the nitty-gritty details. We don't need that. And I'd like to hear from one of the facilitators, maybe sort of Saida, if you could just pick up on that. Would you agree with that to a certain level? I mean, I'm happy to hear otherwise.
Sorry, I was on mute there. I think we've all gone through that experience where we talk and talk and talk and talk, and we still react in certain ways, and we still have, So we know that talking itself doesn't necessarily actually heal us. It's actually the knowledge, the awareness, and the tools and the techniques that we implement that actually heals us. So yeah, I definitely have to agree with you, because how often have we shared our pain with certain people that we might choose to share that with, and we cry about it and we talk and talk and talk, but we seem to be reliving that whole trauma again. So like I can't remember who it was that said reserve your judgment. It was Ruby who said reserve your judgment, go through the experience, actually apply the tools, techniques, and I think it starts off with the number one thing of knowledge and awareness. I always say that you have to it starts off with knowledge and awareness, and from there that you can build on it. So yeah, reserve your judgment and go through the process, be open-minded, and implement the tools, the techniques that you learn on the program, inshallah, to see the benefits.
Yeah.
Oh, lovely answers. Next question. This one is for all. So you may have touched on this, and most of you have, but if there is anything else you want to add, how has being a trauma facilitator impacted your own personal growth and development? So I'll open that up. Whoever wants to go first.
So I'll start. I work in the field of domestic violence and I'm a probation officer. So I work with a lot of people that commit offences and we're looking at healing them. And my field of domestic violence and abuse is so huge. I'm not even going to begin to try and define it. Doing this program, I did a string to my bow that helped me go deeper into the work in different ways and also offer a different type of lifeline, because I now have the clusters. I have coping mechanisms that I'm aware of, but that I used in different ways. So as a probation officer, we get trained to the hilt. We get interventions from substance issues to mental health, and they go on and on. But this specificity helps you target in and hone in on your client, on the person that you're working with, in a way that the other things don't, because this program also touches everybody. Because like we've shared in the group, we've all experienced some level of trauma at some point, maybe didn't need treatment, but when you get that coping mechanism, you go, oh, okay, I can apply this. I didn't realize I was doing that. So it's helped me hone in a finer way.
Is anybody else? Maybe you, Samina? I know you're new, but I think it's impacted you definitely, hasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say that I with the coping mechanisms, I'm now able to kind of sit back and reflect, whereas I wasn't able to do that before. It was kind of like the icing on the cake for me doing this. So it's just having those tools that I can work with on myself.
Yeah. Anybody else before I go on to the next one?
I think becoming a facilitator it's just really validated everything that I ever went through. And I think that's how it's really impacted me, and that's how it's changed me, and it really helps as a facilitator. You know, the validation and the acknowledgement that this is what happens when you go through trauma after living your whole life of not knowing what was going on, and living your whole life in a state of confusion, and then you do the 7-week course. But when you're teaching others, I think a lot of healing takes place there as well. It's a continuous journey, helping them. And it's like just small examples I would sometimes give, like, when I'm explaining a flashback, and my own personal, small sort of like snippets that I'll share, that I'm just like, standing at the kitchen sink and I'm thinking about something and I've taken back and I've suddenly realized I'm standing there crying. And, or, nightmares, if I didn't have nightmares, but it was just a feeling that I'd wake up with, just like a really heavy kind of feeling of feeling like just really crap and unworthy and like full of shame or whatever. And I think each time I've worked with a client, it's just opened something new about me. I've learned something new about myself as well. And it's opened up a lot of like things for them as well. And it's just so amazing. Like it's not something that you just sort of like, textbook, you're teaching them. Like for me, I'm teaching them my lived experience, and that's validating for me that yes, you went through something, all your life, this is what you went through and this is what it is. And I just find that so empowering, and it just leaves me high. That's all I can say.
I think lived experience is so important, and that's why I love Maya's team, because you've all got your own individual stories and you can help different women with those experiences, and men in the like in the case of Ruby. Okay, next question for all of you. What would you say to someone who is worried about having PTSD and scared to share it?
I would say, it is scary, to have PTSD and to share it, like PTSD in itself. Like today, the word's thrown around so loosely. Kids are like, oh, I got PTSD from that. When I was on my journey, or 2019, I didn't know anything about it. It's the first time I'd heard of it because it was related to something totally different. And sorry, Joe, what was the question? I've lost it.
It was, what would you say to somebody who is worried about having
Yeah,
PTSD and scared to share it?
yeah, because I would say that I think once they've they're validated and it's acknowledged and they know and they have that knowledge that what they went through was real, and they let go of the shame and the guilt and the fear and everything, I think they will be in a more empowered state to share it. Whereas if they're scared, that means that there's still something that needs to be kind of worked on, because I couldn't share my story in a scared state. It took a long time for me to sort of like start sharing, but I had to deal with those kind of emotions first and process them, and then I was in a situation or a state to share. Yeah.
I'd like to add to that is, it is very scary, understandably, because you just don't know what kind of can of worms it's going to open, But if you're working with someone who knows what they're talking about, who's been trained by Maya, we know, it's a very safe space and you would be held. And what Nazi said is so important. When you go through trauma, we don't want anything except that our experience is validated. A lot of times our experience is kind of pushed away, like, just like Samina was saying, it is what it is. Let's just get on with it. Let's brush it under the carpet and just live your life. And I think these spaces here will be very safe. So it's okay to do things scared.
Yeah, that's lovely. I agree with that. We've just had one more question come up, and I think we really need to answer this one. How do you know that you have released or recovered from trauma? I think that's a really good question. Do you want to start off, Yasmin?
Oh, okay, I'll start. One of the things I believe is that, what Maya said is that trauma is like our roots. Okay, we don't need to dig it out. We don't need to, it's always going to be there. The important thing is to acknowledge that I'm having a trigger or I'm having a reaction or something's coming up. Because even now, I've done all the work. I'm a counselor, I'm an NLP trainer, I can list all these things, I'm all of these things, but I'm still human and I still have my trauma. It's going to show up when certain things trigger me. And I think it's acknowledging that trigger, like, hold on, what's going on in my body? What's going on in my brain? And you just slow down, and your reactions are not reactions, they're more responses. That's when you're going on a journey. I think the biggest bullshit ever if someone says, I'm healed, 100% healed. None of us are 100% healed. It's always a journey, and it's just getting better day by day, bit by bit. And that's when you know that you're on the right path.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I agree with that, especially the reaction and the response. Like first I would react.
The delay
Now,
in the time of it as well, isn't it?
yeah, yeah. And also like feeling more attuned in your body, feeling more present and more grounded, like being in a more grounded state, and you realize that I'm kind of like more in a grounded state than I am in an activated state.
Yeah.
And reflection, because I will know from speaking from experience, like you were saying, and many of the ladies have vulnerably shared here about anger, right? It was a response, we did it, became our coping response. We hated it with nothing we could do about it at the time because we didn't understand the addiction and the journey that was happening in the body with that. And then you just did it again and again and again. And like what Saeed just said, you'd apologize and you'd say sorry, and you'd pick up all the pieces of brokenness of what that response was. But actually, when you can then reflect and go, right, that happened because of that and that, and actually I'm going to try and delay that response, and like you say, be more less reactive. That's when you're on the healing journey, when suddenly you're able to sit back and go, well, I acted like that too, even if it's 3 weeks ago. I acted like that because of that. And then my body felt like that. And therefore, that's what I need to do. It's exactly as you said, Yasmin, that knowledge is more powerful than we give credit to. So people will feel like, well, but I'm just going to go and do it again. You are going to just probably go and do it again because you are human. But the difference is going to be is that you're not going to beat yourself up about it. And when you don't beat yourself up about it, you don't trigger yourself back into that responsive behavior. So bit by bit, what the issue is we want an overnight cure. We want to be fixed now. And so when it comes to even 7-week program, you're not going to be cured or healed at the end of a 7-week program, maybe even a 7-year program, maybe a 70-year program. So when we are looking for a quick fix, what we do is we're going, right, I'm going to join this program, or I'm going to join this course, not even just our program, is it? It's just overall, we're going to go and have a one-to-one session and I'm going to be healed. And I'm expecting to feel like that. But actually, like you say, it's that expectation that you're never going to meet. So it's very difficult, but it's a bloody good question.
Can
I
I
thought that
add
really
as well that sometimes the changes can be very, very subtle. And when you look back at how your reaction was or your response was, you kind of think, oh, I didn't react how I normally would. And that's when you kind of know yourself that it's actually,
It's working.
process is working. But it is a process, and it is a slow process,
And
So
I think for me, because I was very, very reactive, I was always in a very reactive state. And now everyone in the house is much more calmer because I don't react anymore. They're beginning to feel safe now that she's not going to react, especially my husband.
Oh, that's lovely,
He
Nazi.
knows that she's not going to react, and he feels safe enough to say things or just like joke or whatever. I'd take it personally first. So I just felt like
You start to become more resilient.
Yeah.
You become, so I've noticed I'm more resilient too, and I do think and keep myself a bit calm, and I do feel a lot more in control with my anxiety, and I know my triggers. I know what will start to trigger me off, so I'll always start thinking to myself, I need to keep calm, I need to sort of start. But the drop 3 is amazing. I'm doing the drop 3 whilst I'm driving.
That's it. It's having the knowledge and then the tools, isn't it?
Yeah.
It is. It's amazing. It's just
and like what Samina said, that the subtle changes, isn't it? Like what you've just said, Shaheen, like the drop 3 technique, and probably people thinking, what's that if they've not been on program? But it's just a simple technique that you can do whilst you're driving. It's just something simple, and sometimes at the end, we are busy women. We're busy human beings. We're always on the go. We're always saying we don't have enough time. We've got kids, we've got chores, we've got jobs. And actually, sometimes you don't want to have to go and sit, but for 30 minutes and do a certain practice or a modality. You just want something really quick. But it's actually understanding that really quick technique is taking a longer time to implement, like what you said, Samina. You need patience, that it's going to pay off, and that it's part of the process, as opposed to, well, I tried that and it didn't work. I've done grounding, it doesn't work. I've done breathing, it doesn't work. I've done that, it doesn't work. Because you got it. But again, these are techniques that everybody is throwing out into the therapeutic world, but actually with no meaning behind them. Yeah. So like, okay, so when did you do grounding? Well, I did it when I was in a state of that. Well, no, that's not the right time to do it though, because your mind's not even going to bother, is it? Your mind's not going to like that. Or I told myself to calm down whilst you were angry. Like, have you ever heard somebody tell you to calm down when you're angry? You want to go and punch them back in the face, right? So that's not going to work either. So it's not even the techniques, it's when you're using the techniques. And very often we get thrown these techniques and people are like, well, they don't work. Well, no, probably not, because it's not the right time to be using it. So there's a lot more to it than what meets the eye, but the patience is the problem for many of us.
Yeah, some great answers there. Okay, very last question for Maya. How does the Beyond Trauma programme differ from traditional approaches to trauma healing?
Oh, that's yeah, we're all going to be biased on what we deliver. However, I would like to say or I am actually qualified as a psychotherapist, registered psychotherapist, and that was what I initially went into. And I'm also an NLP trained coach. So what I would say to you, as I've said earlier, is there's no one size fits all. And I think the problem is that we go into things thinking, well, my modality works. Well, I've been very much having to suck eggs on that, really, and actually my modality does work, but you can combine it with other modalities. So it's a modality that's as we've said, it's like the missing jigsaw for some. So it can be a start into healing, it can be a closure of healing, it can just be the launch pad. It can be that you get what we teach in session 3, the coping mechanisms, and you expand on that and you create a bigger toolbox. And I think where we foul in the healing world, and again, it's a lesson I've had to learn the hard way, because when I qualified as a registered psychotherapist, that was it. Sitting there and you telling me your nitty-gritty story was the answer to you healing. And actually, no disrespect, and every modality fits somewhere along the chapter, but that's not necessarily the right modality. And actually, I got bored with listening to people's stories, because I'm like, yeah, okay, so what are we going to do about that? Well, let's get practical. And obviously we couldn't do that as a psychotherapist. It's counseling, you have to listen only and not, respond, so to speak. And that's the same with EMDR. Every single modality has its fitting purpose. But EMDR, for example, you shouldn't be using it when you're completely emotional numb, but yet it's a recommended modality. So again, it's about understanding and having knowledge. And yes, be biased. I love my program, you ladies love the program, but you're also qualified and trained in many other aspects, and I will always encourage you to combine and collaborate. But I think the issue is when we've got somebody telling you this modality works, and then when it doesn't work, you feel broken again, and you feel you're beyond repair again, and then you're back in that cycle of, it's me, I'm the problem.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think your program has got many different things that can help many different people. And the toolbox is, amazing. And that's it. That's all the questions that we've got. And if there's any more questions, if you're watching the replay live on Facebook, feel free to put your questions in the dedicated post, and either Mayameen or the facilitators will get back to you, or feel free to send them a private message.
Well done. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us tonight on our first annual Beyond Trauma Summit 2024. I hope to see you all in 2025 here, part of our team, part of our panel. Until then, I'm going to say I love you, we leave you, and please keep staying in our Facebook group to watch our next series of lives coming up with my fantastic team. Thank you, ladies. You are all worthy, deserving, and rising.